Much, Suzanne. Good morning to everyone, and welcome to a meeting of the Arizona Board of Regents. We began our meeting yesterday afternoon, and this is a continuation of that meeting. Today's public meeting is scheduled to last until 12:30 p.m. today. It is broadcast live on YouTube at the ABOR Live link that you can find on our website. I'd like to take just a moment as we begin this meeting to recognize former Regent Don Ulrich, who passed in the last 10 days. Many of us knew Don well. Don led the search committee that brought us President Michael Crow, and it became clear at that particular point in Don's role on this board that he was committed to our universities becoming far more innovative, really leading the way in doing things that other universities around the country were reluctant to do, too tradition bound to do. He foresaw, I believe, the kind of new economy that we have today, an economy that demands innovation, an economy that demands new ways of doing things. I just offer this as my appreciation to Don Ulrich, who was a major contributor to this board, who was also involved in many ways, not only at ASU through the ASU Foundation, and before that, the Dean's Council of 100, but also Great Hearts Academy, Brophy Preparatory School here in town. Don was heavily involved in a lot of activities after Arizona became his home. John, I believe you have a couple of announcements. Let me turn to our Executive Director, John Arnold.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just wanted to update the board on a couple of changes to ABOR staff. First, I want to recognize Jan Astrike, who retired from ABOR last month. Jan joined the board in 2007, so just over 13 years with the board. She worked on establishing our very first set of metrics. She worked on establishing university peers. She participated in the annual research report. She was our key staffer on TRIF for the last many years, and most recently led staff efforts on establishing the Regents Cup, where I think all of you got to know her a little more directly. And so she was just a terrific member of our team, and was Chad's right-hand person for many, many years. I know he deeply misses her, as we all do, but wish her the very best. She has agreed to help us this year on the Regents Cup, so she's retired but not gone, as we like to say. The other person I'd like to introduce, we've just added Larry Sandigo to the board to help with community relations and outreach. He's the Associate Vice President of External Affairs and Community Outreach. Larry comes to us from Congressman Stanton's office, where he was the Director of Outreach, a Policy Advisor and Counsel. And he most recently served as the Arizona Latino Vote Director for the Biden campaign. So we're very, very excited to have Larry join us. There's already been some confusion in the office between Larry Sandigo and Regent Penley. And so we're going to refer to Regent Penley as Regent Penley, so which will make that easier. But we just wanted to welcome both of them and introduce them to you. I don't see Larry on the screen. He's probably watching over the YouTube channel. I wish I could have him stand up so you could say hi, but you'll be in meetings with him, I think, in the upcoming weeks and months. So thank you.
Thanks very much, Executive Director Arnold. And Jan, just a special thanks for continuing to help us in this year, despite your retirement, and a welcome to Larry Sandigo. Generally at this time in a board meeting where we're gathered in one place rather than dispersed as we are today, we have a call to the audience in which audience members can present their issue, their comments to the board. Each of us listens carefully to those comments They're from a diverse group of individuals over a diverse set of issues. What we try to do following that, in fact, we do not try, is make sure that those issues are passed on properly to the individuals at the universities or at the board office to do our best to address those, to take them into account. In preparation for this meeting, we've had a link available on our board site so that individuals could make comments, make suggestions, and we appreciate those that have come about. If you did not get a chance prior to the beginning of this board meeting, there is a contact link on the board website. You can go to that contact link and provide comments even now. With that introduction, what I'd like to do is move next to the approval of the consent agenda. We have items 11 through 30 on the consent agenda. And let me begin by asking if anyone would like to recuse themselves from any item, or would anyone like any of the items pulled from the consent agenda? Are there any conflicts of interest? Hearing none of those issues raised, I move that the board approve items 11 through 30 as listed on the consent agenda. Do I have a second?
Second.
We do have a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion does pass. We will now move to the business of the Academic Affairs and Educational Attainment Committee. I'm going to turn to Regent Manson, who chairs that committee. Regent Manson.
Thank you very much, Chair Penley, and good morning, everyone. Today, we're asked to approve and review the post-secondary attainment report, and then we will have a discussion with the board office regarding a proposed method for identifying comparator institutions for performance benchmarking. And then finally, we will be asked to approve the appointment of 4 Regents professors for Arizona State University.
Regent Manson, we lost your audio.
Uh-oh.
You're back.
You're back.
Okay. So where did you lose me?
Prior to any turning it over to any staff.
Okay, so we're going to, the board office is asking the board to approve the post-secondary attainment report, and I believe that Director Arnold is going to address the board on this item.
I am, and we have a handful of slides to walk you through this report today. So before I start, I want to thank Chad Sampson and his team, and specifically George Raudenbush and Ryan Tucker, who worked really, really hard to put this report together. It's been 2 years since we last brought this report to the board. First slide, please. Thank you. So just a little bit about this report. So we title it the post-secondary attainment report, but I want to be careful with that. What this report really looks at is our Arizona high school graduates who enroll in 2 or 4 year degree granting institutions within 1 year of completing high school. And then those who earn a 2 or 4 year degree within 6 years of completing high school. So our students who enroll in and complete 2 or 4 year degrees within 6 years is really what we're looking at. Attainment in Arizona has a much broader definition, and certainly the Regents support and encourage post-secondary attainment of any type. But this report specifically looks at who's getting a 2 year degree, who's getting a 4 year degree, and more specifically, and where we'll spend most of our time, is on those students who are attaining a 4 year degree. The way we develop this report is we take data from the Department of Education, the Arizona Department of Education, and they have been terrific to work with, and we are very grateful and appreciative of their partnership on this. And then we match that student level data with data from the National Student Clearinghouse. So we can really see every student in Arizona who graduated from high school, and if they went to any institution across the country, we can match that and so get some pretty clear data on what's going on with our students. So let's move on to the next slide. So this is how we're doing. So this is all post-secondary enrollments and completions. Again, enrollments in a 2 or 4 year institution within 1 year of graduation, completion within 6. So if starting from the left side of the screen, that bottom line, these are post-secondary completions. And we're looking at the time frame from 2005 through 13. So students that graduated from our high schools in one of those years. And you can see we've had steady growth in completions in our state. So this is 2 or 4 years degrees. So the 2005 class completed a degree at 23%, 2013, 29% of our graduates completed a 2 or 4 year degree. Enrollments, on the other hand, are pretty steady, flat over our measured period, especially from 2011 through 2018, we're bouncing around 53% of our students go on to enroll in a 2 or 4 year institution. Next slide, please. So this is drilling down now to just look at 4 year degrees. So again, 4 year enrollments in 4 year degree granting institutions and completions from a 4 year degree granting institution. Again, solid growth between 2005 and 13 in enrollments and steady growth in completions. I got those backwards. Steady growth in completions between 2005 and 13, and then steady growth in enrollments, where we've moved, from 24% in 2011 to 28%. And so you can see that 4 year degree granting institutions are capturing more of the market of students who are enrolling post-secondary. Next slide.
John, before you leave that, can I interrupt and ask a question?
Sure, please go back.
So does this indicate then that we have an increasing percentage, an increasing number of students actually completing their degrees? If enrollment is essentially bouncing around steady, but we have an increasing number of degree completions, we are increasing our percentage in our number of students that are completing 4 year degrees.
So looking at this 4 year data right in front of us, Regent Manson, you can see between 2009 and 13 how those enrolling classes completed. So 22.9% enrolled in 2009, 19% completed in 2013, 26%, 22%. So there's not a lot of improvement in completions over that time period compared to enrollments. We have seen significant improvement in retention rates and graduation rates at our institutions, and as we'll show later, the lion's share of these enrollments and completions are from our institutions. So I would expect that gap to narrow over the next several years as we get into these periods where we've seen significant improvement in those completion rates.
Perfect, thank you.
So before we jump to this slide, go back to the other slide, please. Never mind, let's just stay here. Never mind, stay here for a second. So again, these are enrollment and completion rates for high school graduates. Now we know that not every high school student graduates. And so what I asked is, can we go back and look at 9th graders? I want to know the percentage of our 9th graders that enrolled in college and completed college. And Chad and George told me we can't do that because we don't track individual students from 9th grade through high school. completion and then into this system. And I said, I don't care. Can we just overlay graduation rates, high school graduation rates on top of this data so we can get a sense of how our students are actually performing? And they said that we can do that. Our high school graduation rates are consistent enough over time that well, it's not going to give us the actual truth. It's going to give us a pretty clear shade of the truth and to give you a sense of what's going on with our students. And so what we did is took just last year's high school completion rates and overlaid it onto this data. So if you go to the next slide. So if starting with ninth grade, if you assume ninth grade is 100% of our K-12 students, and we know that's not true. We lose students before they get to the ninth grade, but just assuming ninth grade is our starting point. 83% of those students are going to graduate from high school. That's a 5-year graduation rate. So we pick up a few extra percentage points going to 5 years. About 24 of, again, those ninth graders are going to enroll in a 4-year degree granting institution. And about 18 of those ninth graders are going to end up with a 4-year degree. So starting with ninth grade, about 18% of those ninth graders end up with a 4-year degree. We broke this down by ethnicity and gender as well, so we'll move on. Next slide, please. Thank you. So you can see by ethnicity, and again, this is starting with ninth graders, so this includes high school graduation rates, how our various ethnicities are doing. Next slide, please. And then we broke it down male, female. So again, starting in ninth grade, about 22.5% of our female students end up with a 4-year degree, and just under 15% of our male students end up with a 4-year degree. So the next question is, that's great, but how does that compare? What does that mean? What's the context around this? Is this good? Is it bad? So we pulled out some comparator points. Next slide, please. So the Bureau of Labor Statistics every year does a 10-year job forecast. They just released the last one last month. And it looks at jobs created between 2019 and 2029. And what their forecast suggested was that 50% of all new jobs created over that 10-year period would have a minimum education requirement of a bachelor's degree. 50% would require a bachelor's degree. Now, that period is between 2019 and 2029, which means it captures the job losses due to COVID. And we know that many of the job losses, the majority of the job losses over the last year were in lower education required jobs, which I think has spiked that number a little bit. Last year, the forecast said 41% of all new jobs would require a bachelor's degree as a minimum education requirement. So somewhere between 40 and 50% of all new jobs created. National workforce, there's many ways to measure the national workforce and their education attainment levels. You can look at, everyone between the ages of 25 and 65, 25 and older. What we did is looked at everyone who was employed. So everyone employed in the nation in 2019, 39% had a 4-year degree or higher. In Arizona, it was 33% of everyone employed in 2019 had a 4-year degree or higher. And again, we are producing at 18%. One way I like to think about it is Arizona is retiring at 33%, and we are producing at 18%. That makes me nervous. Next slide, please. I'm going to start saying, okay, there it is. So I've done this presentation a handful of times over the last few years, and the question of why always comes up, and what's going on in Arizona, and what's driving this, because if we go back to ethnicity data, every ethnic class other than Asians underperformed the United States. So it's not an ethnicity problem, it's an Arizona problem. So what's going on in this state? And so here's one data point, and I think it really speaks to the cultural barriers and the roadblocks that we're up against as we really deal with this problem. So this is births to mothers 25 years and older by education level. 2017 is the latest data, but I can't imagine it changes that much. So the US total is 42%, about 42% of all births to mothers 25 years and older were born to a mom with a bachelor's degree or higher. Arizona, it's 32%, and in fact, only 23% of all births in Arizona were to a mother with a bachelor's degree or higher. The education attainment level of the mom is a key indicator of whether or not a child will go on to a four-year degree program. But look at the states. So you can. This is ranked by it's color coded by percentage. Black is 50% or more of the births were to moms with four-year degree or higher. You can see the Northeast has some of that. That dark blue is less than 35%. And so look at the states that Arizona is in that same category with. Alaska, Nevada, New Mexico, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and West Virginia. And you sit there and think, what does Arizona have in common with those states? We're much larger than those states from a population perspective. We're much more urban than those states, and so you step back and think about the economy Arizona has versus the economy of these other states, and you can see where this is a significant problem for our state. Next slide, please. So, I'm sorry for the look of this, so let me explain it, because I think it's really interesting. The other thing that we've noted is high school matters, and where you go to high school matters. So what we did, the dots are every high school in Arizona. Percentage along the bottom are four-year college enrollment rates for that high school. The gray on the right-hand side is underperforming national averages. So that's the color code on the graph. Left-hand side is above national average, right-hand side below national average. 72% of Arizona's public high schools, 72 of the 515 Arizona public high schools are outperforming the national four-year college enrollment rate. So that's 14% of our high schools outperform the national enrollment rates, which means
86%.
do not. And here's the other piece. So 11,000, about 15% of the 71,000 public high school graduates attended a school outperforming. So again, 85% of our students attended a school that was underperforming the four-year college enrollment rate. So we brought this data to the board 2 years ago, and when we completed the presentation, I was instructed not to bring this report back to the board, but instead come back and talk about how we're changing the outcomes. So wanted to go through the data a little bit, but the next piece is, let's talk about what we're doing to try to attack this problem. I think we all recognize how significant of a problem this is for Arizona's future economy and for our own students. I don't know why the slide jumped, but it did. So we'll talk about this slide. So number one, we have 3 terrific universities in this state and 3 presidents who are driving, understand this problem, have taken this problem on as a challenge to improve these outcomes. And so this is the degree completions, percentage of degree completions by institution. You will note 70% of all degree completions in 2018 for Arizona high school graduates were granted by one of our 3 institutions. When it comes to degrees for Arizona students, our 3 institutions are the game. We have a tremendous amount of influence over this. And so that's an incredible performance, and the expansion of access and success of our students has been phenomenal over the last few years. Next slide, please. So other steps we've taken just in the last 2 years. We've partnered with the governor to create the Arizona's Teachers Academy to address teacher shortages in our state. And we already have thousands of students who are enrolled in the Teachers Academy. We've seen growth in our education schools. And maybe most exciting is the percent of minorities that are enrolling in our Teachers Academy outpaces the percentage of minorities in our universities, and significantly outpaces the percent of minorities in our current teaching ranks. So I think this is a huge win that will have long-term implications for our college going and completion rates. We launched the New Economy Initiative, that really speaks to this need and to garner legislative and community support for degree granting and degree attainment. ASU Digital Prep, and President Crow can speak to this much better than I can, has partnered with dozens of high schools to provide better access to curriculum and instructors. We're improving and developing new external relationships to promote the value of higher education and to bring this issue and put it on the agendas for organizations all across the state. One of the most important things we've done, and an item we've been working on it for years, is we've entered into data sharing agreements with the Arizona Department of Education, community college system through AZ Transfer, that for the first time we have the beginnings of a longitudinal data system in this state where we can track a student through the K-12 system, the community college system, and our systems. We could not have done this without Superintendent Hoffman's cooperation. She and her team have been terrific to work with on this, and this is a major step forward, just getting the data to really understand what's going on in the depths of organizations. Next slide, please. Later today, we're going to ask you to set aside some funding for a plan to further study K-12 performance, to really drill down into that pipeline, see where the leaks are, where are we losing these students on their path to post-secondary attainment. We've developed and disseminated research reports on the worth of college, including graduate wages report. This is another one I'm very excited about. We'll talk a little bit later about as well. In partnership with the Chief 60 and the Commission for Post-Secondary Ed and College Success AZ, ASU developed Benji, which is an artificial intelligence chatbot to help students with counseling for college enrollment, and specifically to help them complete the FAFSA. Arizona has one of the lowest FAFSA completion rates in the country. It's critical that we improve that performance, and this is a major step forward in that arena. We have a brand new partnership with the U.S. Census Bureau that we've been working on again for years to expand college graduate outcome reporting. And then, there's a number of public engagement initiatives we've launched on again to expand the concern around this message, and certainly to look at the great work our universities are doing, including the Regents Cup. So that is the end of my slides, but certainly would welcome any comments from the presidents on this topic, or if there's any questions, please feel free.
So do we have any questions or comments from the board or anybody from the universities?
President Crow is waving his hand.
I just wanted to, if it's all right, Regent Manson, I just wanted to correlate John's presentation here to a presentation that I've given a few times and for which we have a dedicated staff person at ASU working with me on the economic geography of Arizona and our competitiveness. And I'll sort of raise to the board again. So this indicator that John is talking about, which is unbelievably low educational attainment, is the single most explanatory variable for the state's rapid decline in per capita GDP. So we have fallen from a historic multi-decadal position of being at or near the average GDP per capita of the country. And now we're in the lower 4 states with the fastest decline ever experienced. So if I was speaking to political or business leaders of the state beyond the Regents, I would say Arizona's greatest strategic error was the selfish assumption that you could grow the state successfully by population growth and a few businesses and not have to invest in the human capital in which the economy of the state going forward would be dependent. It's a strategic error of the highest proportion. It is off the charts. I'm giving a presentation at the upcoming Morrison Institute State of the State address that I've been working on, State of the State meeting that I've been working on, looking at the future of Arizona. We have the lowest educational attainment for people of Latino descent in the 4th largest county in the country, Maricopa County, in the country, 9%. And so if you look at the population demographics, if you look at the economic competitiveness, and not to be harpy about this, we made a strategic blunder of the highest order at the moment where the impact of that blunder will be the greatest, and that is the technological modernization of the economy. So as technological modernization accelerates, we'll have more and more people no longer able to compete in the economy, dependent on welfare. And then someday you may wake up and they'll vote in large numbers to tax the rich in very, very significant ways to pay for things that they think are important. And so we are right now, this is, I mean, I'm just going to raise the double hurricane warning flag. We are in the middle of an economic hurricane and are in some ways too stupid to understand it because we're satisfied with the economic progress that we've made, but we don't realize that we have not solved this problem. And so what I can tell you is that this is the central objective driving ASU forward relative to scale, relative to innovation, relative to technological developments, all the things that we're trying to do, because for those of us that want to raise our families here and our children here and our grandchildren here, there's no positive outcome ahead, none. And this is not doom and gloom. I'll just mention one last time for the Regents, and Larry, you're familiar with this, having been up in Colorado running a big institution. Colorado has now 30% the per capita GDP that we do, 30% more than we do. They have educational attainment numbers that are more than twice our level. And they are, and I'll show this in my numbers, unaffected by the present recession, unaffected. Our effect, 4th largest in the country in the present recession. That is the pandemic recession, whatever that happens to be. And so this, in my own view, I guess my last point would be that this should be a central objective of the Regents, bar none, all out, flat out, because we do not have a strategy to solve this in Arizona at the moment. What we have are valiant efforts with no strategy.
Regent Penley, I would I would concur with President Crow's comments. It's, you know, people ask me on occasion, do we have, you know, folks working on attainment, or do we have an attainment employee? And the answer is all of our employees are attainment employees. It is part and parcel of everything we do. Is, you know, it's central to the Regent's mission, to this office mission, to our university's mission, is working to improve those numbers.
I would just add, Regent Manson, if that's all right, to John's point. So, and I make this statement in a design conceptualization, not in a critical conceptualization. I think it was former Regent Jack Jewett would mock other regents in public meetings that Regent Duval will remember about, well, can you tell us what color the paint is inside boiler number 6 in building 22, and why that paint costs $2.67 a gallon versus $2.66 a gallon. So the point that he was making in that is that the regents are the only body in the state that has the power, the authority, and the constitutional duty to focus on educational attainment at the bachelor's degree level and above, period. No one else even exists. And most of the agenda of the regent should be focused on that. And that is where we're having the difficulty that we're having. And so on the social scale. So Regent Jewett can send in his message about the boilers. And so he would do this. So Regent Duval, you remember this. So
Regent Manson, you have some comments, I think.
Yes, I do. I have Regent Shootman followed by Regent Taylor Robeson.
Thank you, Chair Penley and Regent Manson. First, President Crow, just what did happen on those boilers? I mean,
we got the right paint. We got the right paint.
I truly appreciate your comments, and I couldn't agree more. Attainment is the challenge of our day. And in practice, it presents itself in very interesting ways. One example is we had a great victory of getting Raytheon Missile Systems to expand in Southern Arizona. They set out to hire 1,400 new employees. They hired every graduate they could get from our 3 universities, and they ended up with 1,000 vacancies because not a single applicant from within the state of Arizona stepped forward. They had to undertake the effort to recruit people from out of state. So the effect of this on our state is more people move in that have the education and expertise that these companies need, while our children are left to work in service level jobs with little hope of a prosperous future. So I concur with President Crow and John, of course, on this being a top issue for us. So thank you for those comparative numbers from both of you.
Regent Taylor Robeson.
Thank you. Well, I just want to say, if there was ever a call to action for this board, this report is it. We, every meeting we have multiple reports, and we sit and we listen and we hear them and we attempt to respond and react to those reports. But as Dr. Crow said, if we get this one wrong, we simply haven't done our job. He talks about the paint in the boiler rooms. I was reminded of a board I served on back in 2008 during the recession. And when the board got down to arguing over what kind of eggs should be served at the board breakfast, I knew we were in deep, deep trouble, right? We're going to miss the big things. And this is the big thing. This is the big thing for the future of Arizona. And we could set every other report aside. And if we just focused on this one, we would be doing our job as members of this board. And I think what Chair Penley has done with the New Economy Initiative is a beginning. It's a great beginning, but each one of us need to redouble our efforts to educate people on the dire state of affairs when it comes to post-secondary attainment in Arizona. So count me in, Chair Penley and Chair Manson. I will do anything and everything I can as a member of this board to help improve these numbers. Thank you.
Taylor Ropes and Regent Schupman. These are in, this report, when it comes before us, I remember the response 2 years ago, and it was almost stunned silence and disbelief. And it doesn't appear that there has been improvement, but it is something that I truly believe is fundamental to our mission and the health of the state of Arizona going forward. So take President Crow's words to heart. Something about an attainment strategy that we really truly focus on, fundamentally and openly in every meeting is probably a worthwhile opportunity to grasp. At this point, has a hand up. Regent Duval.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought maybe it was mine, but your audio died. I just want to add a thought to this. This is, we face a number of barriers. We start with existing poverty. We start with an existing demographic that is underachieved and therefore has lower expectations. There are a number of sort of embedded downward spiral dynamics that we're dealing with. As President Crow and others talk about, we lack aspiration, which is a job we can take on. But I do want to put forward what will be an uncomfortable topic, but it is the real topic. There is a cultural component of this. There's an ideological component to this. There's a leadership component to this, but there is a revenue component of this. And we have reduced Arizona revenue 23 of the last 24 years. And so even folks who want to be supportive in the legislative context or in the business community, even if they express support, they are, as a matter of math, over and above ideology, are constrained in their ability to be effective because we simply lack the revenue base to be competitive. And so if we're serious about this, I'd like to challenge the board. We should work with our allies at the legislature and in the community, and the business community, and everyone else who's a part of this to say, stop with the tax cuts. That the dynamic of the 21st century economy is both a competitive tax and regulatory environment, to be sure, but it is also talent. It is also workforce. And to President Crow's point, Colorado's economy was almost identical to ours 25 years ago. And they struck a different balance between the right regulatory and tax environment and the right workforce investment, and we haven't. And I think as part of our messaging, we need to make the revenue argument. I'm not necessarily talking about new taxes, although I would, but I'm really talking about the constant reduction in our revenue floor is an ongoing structural challenge that will make it impossible for us to get to a promise program or other tools that we need in order to make a fundamental long-term difference in attainment.
Thank you, Regent Duval. Seeing no other comments or questions, I'm going to ask for a motion to approve the post-secondary attainment report.
Thank you very much, Regent Manson. There is a motion, I believe, to support this report, right, Regent Manson?
Yes, there is.
Second.
No, I need a motion made.
I move we accept this report.
And do I have a second?
Second.
Chair Penley, we have a motion and a second.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes, Regent Manson.
Thank you. We're going to move quickly on now to a discussion regarding from for identifying comparisons for
We're losing you.
address the board. Yeah, I don't know. My audio is bad this morning for some reason. I apologize. Am I still there? Helen, could you please
Yes,
address the board?
I can hear you.
Okay, Helen, could you please address the board on the comparator institutions, please?
Thank you, Chair Manson, and good morning, Regents and Presidents Chen, Crow and Robbins and others joining us. Before I begin, I just want to thank individuals at each of our three universities who have lent considerable time and expertise to help us iteratively improve the framework I'm about to present this morning. So from ASU, that's Rich Stanley, Christian Osmenia, Christine Wilkinson, and Maria Angriano. From NAU, Provost Diane Stearns, Christy Farley, and Bjorn Flugstad. And from U of A, Provost Liesl Folks and Barry Brummond. And finally, George Raudenbush in the ABLE office, who's been indispensable in putting this material together. If we could have the next slide, please. So historically, the board has developed official peer lists for each institution, and these lists were first developed in 2009, and they haven't been updated since. So it is perhaps past time that the question of institutional comparators was revisited. And what we're proposing today is a departure from the peer lists of 2009. We're moving away from the idea of maintaining a single universal list of institutions called peers, and instead proposing a method for contextualizing the performance of ABLE institutions on key metrics through controlled comparisons to other institutions that are operating under similar basic conditions. We're abandoning the use of a single peers list for several reasons. The first is that a single universal list of peers is inherently static. So over time, universities that might have been good matches initially can cease to be good matches for any number of reasons. Secondly, a single universal list required us to conflate the distinct research and educational missions of our institutions. Certain factors that affect research performance have no bearing on educational performance and vice versa. For example, having a medical school is obviously a major factor affecting research productivity, but it's not a major factor in retaining and graduating students. And conversely, having a high proportion of Pell Grant recipient students significantly affects an institution's propensity to retain and graduate students, but it has no real bearing on research productivity. So we think it makes sense to separate research and educational outcomes and only consider research relevant factors when analyzing and contextualizing research performance, and education relevant factors when analyzing educational performance. And finally, devising a single peers list involves the use of a lot more complex statistical techniques such as cluster analysis, and this requires standardization across units of measurement and somewhat subjective weighting of all the different factors. And so what we're recommending instead is a much more simple and transparent model for comparative benchmarking that can also be very readily integrated into our routine ABLE reporting. And you'll find in your board materials that accompany this item an example of the sorts of reporting that we think we will present using this comparator data. Next slide, please. So whereas the peer lists of 2009 had multiple envisaged uses, the intended usage for the new institutional comparators data is very limited and focused. The sole purpose of ABLE comparator lists is to contextualize performance against enterprise and other key metrics by showing how our institutions are doing relative to other institutions that are operating under similar conditions. So we intend to provide institutional comparator lists for all the research and educational metrics where comprehensive national data is available. For example, research expenditures, enrollment growth, retention rate, graduation rate, bachelor's degrees awarded, etc. These lists are going to be integrated into our reports, and we anticipate them being part of the revamped OFR process as exhibits or background materials. And as I mentioned, the board book contains an example of how this information will be presented in our reporting. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned earlier, we think it makes sense to distinguish between research and educational outcomes when we're identifying comparator institutions, because different factors affect research versus education. And moreover, Arizona universities are somewhat unusual, though by no means unique, in combining top flight research activity with a heavily access-oriented educational mission. Hence, reasonable comparator institutions for research outcomes very often tend to be much more academically and socially exclusive institutions that are therefore not great comparators when we're looking at educational outcomes. So we separate the two, and in order to identify suitable educational comparators for each institution, we are applying a series of filters or scope conditions to the universe of four-year institutions, as you see on this slide in front of you. We filter first for, and so applying these filters, we then develop reference institutions that we make our comparisons against. So We begin by filtering for size and control, then for some institutional and student cohort characteristics, the details of which I'll go over in a moment. And these generate our reference institutions. And once the reference institutions are put in rank order of best to worst performing on the specific metric of interest, we can generate two different types of lists. The nearest neighbors list is simply the 10 institutions that are performing most similarly to the target institution on the given metric, i.e. the 5 institutions above and below the ABOR institution we're looking at. And the best in class list is comprised of the 10 top performing institutions overall. And the reason we have best in class lists is to try and identify the upper bound of expected performance for institutions that are operating under similar conditions to ours. Next slide, please. So this table provides some more specific elaboration of the scope conditions that we're proposing to apply for each institution to identify their educational comparators. So for both ASU and U of A, we're looking at very large, i.e. 30,000 plus undergraduate enrollments, public R1 institutions with at least 20% Pell Grant recipients and an admission rate of 40% or higher. For NAU, we are looking at large, so 15 to 30,000 undergraduate enrollments, public research doctoral awarding institutions with at least 30% Pell Grant recipients and an admission rate of 50% and above, located outside of a major urban area. And in the board materials, we show the reference population and comparator lists that are generated when we apply these scope conditions for the example outcome of 6-year graduation rates. Next slide, please. So for research comparators, the process is the same, but the scope conditions obviously differ. So beginning with the universe of 4-year institutions, we filter for control and Carnegie classification, then for the presence or absence of a medical school, and then for NAU only, we apply a filter for the degree of urbanization because location does have a bearing on an institution's capacity to attract and retain top research faculty. And this gives us our reference population for which we then derive our 2 lists, the nearest neighbors and the best in class. Next slide, please. So again, this table shows the specific details and calibrations of the scope conditions we're proposing. For ASU, we're looking at public R1 institutions that don't have a medical school. For NAU, we're looking at public R1/R2s up to the top performing R2 without a medical school located outside of a major urban area. And for U of A, we're looking at public R1 institutions with a medical school. And in your board materials, you'll find an exhibit illustrating the application of these conditions for the example outcome metric of total annual research expenditures. Next slide, please. So we believe the approach that we've just outlined will provide valuable contextual information about institutional performance for regents and other key stakeholders. And additionally, we think it is more simple and transparent and objective, perhaps, than the earlier peers lists. And we're very grateful for the constructive input and assistance that our university counterparts have taken to help us get this far. That said, there are a couple of outstanding questions that may bear some further discussion this morning. The first is that the framework we've just outlined is designed for benchmarking traditional emergent student outcomes. And while this broad approach is definitely readily transferable to online education benchmarking, we will need some further discussion to identify suitable scope conditions and data sets for devising online comparator institutions. But we expect this work can be accomplished as part of the already underway efforts to identify online education metrics. The second outstanding question is that the scope conditions for educational outcomes could be overly specific and limiting the reference set of institutions to only 16 in the case of UA and ASU and only 19 in the case of NAU. And it is worth considering whether we want to relax or remove some scope conditions to increase the size of the reference sets. There's obviously a trade-off here between specificity and comparative richness. With more relaxed conditions, we get a broader national snapshot of institutions, but the wider the net, obviously, the less directly comparable the institutions become to our own. So that is one thing I wanted to put before you for some discussion. I will leave it here and allow time for discussion of these or any other questions. I hope what I've presented has been clear, but if there's any points of clarification, I will stand ready to answer them. Thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you, Helen. I know it's been this has been a yeoman's task to work through this, and I appreciate all of your efforts and your team's efforts. Are there comments? I see a comment from Regent Pendley.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I just want to thank you, Regent Manson, and your committee and colleagues for the work that you've done in getting us to this point. I also want to laud the work of Helen, Chad, and George, the 3 staff members who've been most closely associated with this. It really addresses an issue that many of us on the board have felt a need to deal with for some time. It adds to our ability to differentiate the 3 universities and carry forward what was begun in 2002 with the work that the Regents did on changing directions. So thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions? I see no blue hands, and I'm not seeing anybody waving at me. Okay. At this point, I again thank the team. This has been a great discussion. I look forward to implementing and working through these evaluations. Our final item today is the approval of 4 Regents professors for ASU, and I believe that President Crow is going to present those.
Yes, thank you, Regent Manson. We appreciate very much the system that we have in place, which allows us to give the title Regents Professor to the top 3%, never more than 3% of our faculty. This has been and remains our highest honor. It is achieved through, in a sense, putting the faculty member through yet again another tenure level decision, but now at the highest level. A Regents Professor, by my expectation, is a person who would be a chaired professor at any university in the country. They would have the capability and have had the capability of contributing to their field, but also being a leader and driving things forward in every possible way. We have 4 candidates. I will overview them, and then Provost Searle can comment in more detail. We have Ferran Garcia, who is a former Dean of Science here at ASU, went back to the faculty. He's working on microbiomes inside your body. There's unbelievable other organisms alive in there on which your entire existence is dependent and your health is dependent, and he focuses on the biology of these microbiomes. Steve Graham, who's in our Mary Lou Fulton Teachers College, and Steve focuses on something that we all take for granted, which is writing. How do we learn to communicate through writing as a animal, as a creature? How does that work? How does the brain work in the writing process, the way that we formally communicate? And that's very, very powerful. Devonay Loser, who is a literary critic and historian in on our English faculty. She has focused her career at understanding basically the importance and the evolution of English literature to our culture. And Ayanna Thompson, who's also a very distinguished faculty member who leads our medieval studies center here at ASU. Yes, we have a medieval studies center, and who is a Shakespeare scholar of the highest order. So these 4 faculty members, we believe, have attained the status and have been so reviewed by others outside the university in a national and international review process. And so we bring them to you for your consideration. Provost Searle, anything that you would like to add to this?
Just want to add that certainly reinforce that these are truly remarkable individuals, and the work that Ferran does on cyanobacteria, which is blue-green algae for those of us who aren't in biology, and is a remarkable and perhaps one of the most important substances to understand, because it actually manufactures food from sunlight. And his work has been just, I mean, the rave reviews we got were unbelievable for the work he's doing. And I identified that he's really opened up 3 different avenues of science. I mean, he's really done remarkable work, and the impact this has on ecology will be significant, as well as on our persons. Steve Graham, also a remarkable individual, called upon regularly to consult with UNESCO, NIH, the Gates Foundation, and others because of his expertise, an elected fellow of the American Educational Research Association. He is a real leader in this space, and I think worth noting that one of our reviewers said, Dr. Graham is one of the preeminent educational psychologists in the world. By any standard used to evaluate scholarship and influence on academics, the name of Steve Graham will rise to the top of that list. On our two humanists, two who look at English from different perspectives. Devaney studies mostly British women writers and has done a great deal of work on Jane Austen. In fact, her book on Jane Austen was reviewed in the Atlantic Monthly, and the reviewer described it as more entertaining than any reception history has a right to be. She is, by the way, also a roller derby star. For those of you interested, she is a really interesting leader and a foundation professor of English, and then and most recently received a Guggenheim Award for her work, as well as recognition from the National Endowment of Humanities for Humanities. And Ayanna Thompson, Ayanna was actually with ASU for a long time, starting in 2003, and then left for a 5-year or 4-year hiatus to George Washington University, and realized that the opportunities and the ability to do her work was better here. And I do want to emphasize that the Center for Medieval and Renaissance Studies is a tri-university center that's headquartered at ASU. But when the board actually endorsed it many, many years ago, it was meant to and does serve all 3 of the universities. And her contribution is really studying of Shakespeare and understanding how Shakespeare's use of race still influences how we perceive things today. And she really has done a remarkable job. And her perhaps most noted monograph is called Passing Strange. Passing Strange is a comment from Othello, for those of you who remember. It's described as one of the most important books on contemporary cultural practices, seen through the representations of Shakespeare's works, and deservedly studied and taught widely. So all of these individuals are incredible individuals. They're not only fantastic scholars, as the president alluded to, but they are also unbelievably committed to their students and to the excellence that their students reflect.
And the last thing that I would add, and it just goes to the first sentence of our charter, that Arizona State University is a comprehensive public research university. Comprehensive means all subjects. That means we have Shakespearean scholars and Jane Austen scholars and microbiome scholars across thousands and thousands of topics, because our assignment for Arizona is to build a faculty equal to the faculty at any other university in the world, but to empower that faculty to work at scale with diversity, with speed and technology to make these things happen. And all 4 of these faculty members at this new Regents rank represent the embodiment of all those things. They're equal to any scholar anywhere in their field, but are committed to the mission that ASU has as the kind of institution that we have evolved to be.
Thank you, President Crow. Do we have any comments or questions regarding the Regents professors?
Regent Manson, we lost your audio once again.
Suzanne, since we seem to have lost, maybe Regent Manson is back. If not, I know she was going to call for a motion to really endorse the Regents professors from ASU. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion does pass.
Regent Penley, we did not get a second on that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Was there a second?
Second.
Thank you. I'll call for a vote again. Thank you, Executive Director Arnold and Suzanne and Jenny and all the others who were trying to stop me. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes. Thanks for keeping me on track when I fail, which seems to happen relatively often. I want to thank Regent Manson and her committee We've really just addressed some highs and lows. Certainly in recognizing these Regents professors, that is a high. We created this, or a board did many years ago, long before I became a Regent, to really recognize the central role that our faculty play in really providing the kind of education that we need and really contributing enormously to the level of attainment and the quality of that attainment that we have in the state of Arizona. And the four individuals that President Crow and Provost Searle presented are exemplary of that kind of faculty that we have at all three universities. Their work, although it might seem slightly obscure to many people, really does matter. I was forced, in fact, I benefited from learning about cyanophyta blue-green algae so many years ago, and still value what I learned about the very important role that they played in creating life on this planet. If we look to the greatness of the English language, we see that especially in the writing of people like Jane Austen and William Shakespeare, a reminder that English's willingness to adopt, incorporate words and approaches to grammar from so many other languages has made this one of the richest languages in the world, with one of the largest, or perhaps the largest, vocabulary. So that certainly is a high. But unfortunately as well, Regent Manson and her committee has brought us one of the lows that we confront as this board, and that is our level of attainment. So many regents spoke up about that. It has and is and will continue to be a central part of what this board must do. Our executive director, John Arnold, made an excellent presentation, but not just the unfortunate, unhappy parts of where we are, but what John focused on was what this board is doing to really alter that attainment level. That discussion is going to continue in just a moment, but it strikes me, John, and I suspect it does to all of our members of the board, that when we return in February, when the legislature is in session in Arizona, then indeed we should spend just a little time, despite how pressed our schedule is, on attainment once again, especially so as the governor and the legislature are considering lowering taxes perhaps, or changes in the law that may well not promote the kind of educational attainment that we need. What we're going to need from our governor and our legislature is legislation, resources, and support that will matter for improving the quality of education once again. Last year in the abbreviated session that we had, Governor Ducey supported and endorsed, and I believe we had major support from members of the legislature for our new economy initiative, both the aspect of it that focused on the kind of education we need for the jobs of the future, as well as a kind of scholarship program that would increase attainment, particularly among our Hispanic students who tend to be disproportionately poor, but focused on all students who, because of the income of their families or their personal income, are not able to access our universities. As we continue our discussion in the legislative agenda, and as I introduce those who are going to be a part of that in a moment, we're going to continue to talk about a critical piece of attainment, and that is in terms of the counselors that we have in the state of Arizona, where we have, if not the lowest, one of the lowest rates of counselors per student anywhere in the United States, with 900 students per single counselor. We lack in so many schools the kind of counselors that we need, not only to provide career advice to help with the FAFSA form, but also advisors who deal with the psychological challenges. And when I've talked to high school students, the sociological challenges that they confront as well, with drugs in their family, with inability to get food, with inability to find a place to stay and sleep every evening. Counselors are critical as a part of this. So as I introduce Brittany Kaufman, Lorenzo Martinez, and the University Government Affairs representatives from our 3 universities, we will begin there. But let me turn to Brittany, and you can introduce the others who are joining you to speak to the board today. Brittany?
Sure. Thank you, Chairman Penley, Regents. I want to thank Regent Duvall. Actually, a lot of it started from an exercise. Well, this all started from an exercise he gave us to look at FAFSA completion requirements that a few states recently enacted. They were implemented FAFSA completion for high school graduation. So as we started digging into that issue, we started talking to various stakeholders, our peers in different states, but also here, about really what is at the heart of the issue around FAFSA completion. And one thing became obviously clear, we already knew it, but it came up in every conversation, is around the lack of guidance and strong support systems for these counselors in K through 12 schools to help students to prepare them to be college and career ready. So we've invited a few folks here today to help us in a conversation about the issue. Joining us, we have Andrea Glenn, she's the secondary coordinator for the Arizona Department of Education. Amanda Nolasco, I'm probably butchering that name, but she's the school counselor specialist at ADE as well. Roxanne Dewar-Murphy, she's the Arizona College Access Network. And Heidi Doxey, she's the program manager of community initiatives, and she oversees Project Benji, which we're going to highlight later in this conversation. Andrea and Amanda are going to kick it off, and we'll turn it over to Roxanne and Heidi. But along the way, if Regents, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. But we've also reserved some time at the end for some Q&A. So Andrea and Amanda, you're up.
All right, thank you. My name is Amanda Nolasco. Thank you so much for having us here today. I'm going to speak a little bit about the ratio, that the numbers that you see up there, and where our state is moving forward, and a little bit of what our counselors need to help with our college retention, retainment, and application process. The 904-to-1 ratio comes from the American School Counselors Association, who puts out that report annually based upon data that they use. We are hoping to see that number go down based upon some new counseling positions that were opened up this last year due to the school safety program expansion of allowing counselors and social workers under those monies. So we're excited that we have 140 new counselors in the state right now working in schools based upon money given from the governor's budget. The slide is small, I'm sorry, on my phone. We know that we have about 532, I think, new counselors that have been hired under our new certification law that we opened up in the last year. That was a great partnership with the Arizona School Counselors Association, that we knew if we were going to be hiring more counselors in the state, we needed to open up the certification language than just those coming from a traditional master's in school counseling. So now people who have a master's degree in a related field can become certified with a 6 credit hour deficiency that they can complete in 3 years. It is crucial that we have our counselors in our schools following a comprehensive school counseling model so that they can properly work with students in the areas of academic achievement, social emotional learning, and career readiness, which we know includes all post-secondary pathways. And along that is obviously college retention, recruitment, and the FAFSA completion, which I'd like to turn over to Andrea to discuss the things that schools have been working on or areas where we feel we need more support.
Thank you, Regent Penley and Brittany, for having us this evening or this afternoon. Sorry. Definitely, some solutions as we spoke with the superintendent, and we're trying to think about things in areas where we can be in intentional and strategic partnership with ABOR. For one, I know there's been some talk of looking at like a counselor's academy, kind of parallel or similar to the new teachers academy. And while we think that would be really great, we also think that counselors are really pivotal, but one of the things that we're seeing is that what they need is support. And so while, all our LEAs have a counselor on site, they don't necessarily have that support or that structured dream team around them to help kind of achieve some of the things that are put on their plate and that they're tasked with. And that was pre-pandemic, and now we have the pandemic on top of that. And so they're definitely being pulled in multiple directions. We have some amazing programs here. And so, things that we're thinking of is maybe expanding some of the programs that are currently here. So whether that's looking at expanding support staff in our Advise AZ AmeriCorps program, or looking at something in similar fashion model to having like a tri-university advisor program that might speak kind of similar to what Maricopa has, where they place advisors directly in targeted schools to help work in tandem with counselors to support their college enrollment and matriculation. So those are some of the things that we were thinking of in terms of our counselor to student ratio and kind of helping with that. In terms of FAFSA completion, we definitely know we're not on the mark, and definitely working, continuously with our counselors to support them in that. This year, it's very difficult since we don't have the luxury of having those in-person meetings that typically a counselor would have with their students. But we're still trekking along and we're doing great. I know our counterpart CSA are going to speak more about Ask Benji and the amazing things that that's been able to provide even with the pandemic. But things that we currently have in place between our FAFSA hotline that's both in English and Spanish, our college access centers, and the different partnerships that they have in with the various different with the various different high school institutions has been working as well. As of October 1st, we are right now at 17% of students completing FAFSA here in the state of Arizona. Our goal this year, as you guys know, is 52%. And so in order to continue that goal, we and the superintendent is definitely in support of looking at a particular mandate that might support counselors in having electronic, resources such as Ask Benji, that could support our counselors in creating a atmosphere that lends an ear to pushing out information in a strategic way to those students and to the families so that they have the support to ensure that they can continue with the FAFSA completion goal that we're hopefully on par to complete by 2021.
Brittany, you're muted.
Gosh, knew that was going to happen. Amanda, explain to us the school safety, how that included counselors, and then the issue with certification.
Yes, so the school safety program in the past only included funding for schools to receive school resource officers. And so last year, bills were introduced by Senator Bowie and Representative Pollock to include more counselors to lower the ratio. When that was not heard, then the governor did include more money in his executive budget to expand the school safety program to include school counselors and include social workers as a more comprehensive school safety program. And so that's where we see there were 149 positions that were allocated because of that new money, and then 140 of those have been filled. So those 9 we're hoping to fill in January. In terms of certification, when we knew that we were opening up more positions, we had to make sure that we had a pipeline that could fill those positions to make sure that we had the need. Because we do know that our kids do need a lot more social emotional support. And the way the the previous certification was written was that only those that came through a master's in school counseling could earn a school counseling certificate through ADE. But we know that people who work in other areas of mental health definitely have the skills that, required to work with our students to meet those social emotional needs. So we worked, ASCA worked with ADE and others to open that language to make different options available to certification, similar like we see to teachers. And then that's where the deficiency comes in, where most of them come from a mental health background. So they need 6 additional master's level courses in college and career advising, school counseling, or academic advising to help them work in the schools.
And then I also want to point out that we asked AD and some of the external to come and talk to us today, but I don't want to leave out what our colleges are doing, and I think our universities are doing, and that could be a different discussion as we move forward. And I also wanted to highlight that this is part of NAU's budget request. It's focused on behavioral and mental health. And then it's also hitting on a topic we'll discuss later in this agenda regarding psychologists and licensure. So I don't want to leave out what our universities are doing, but just point out that we've just brought some outside partners that we think moving forward to address this issue, we can work and collaborate with. So do you guys have any questions of Amanda or Andrea before we move on to Advise AZ? All right, Roxanne, go ahead.
Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Roxanne Murphy, and I'm the Director of Statewide Initiatives in the Arizona College Access Center at College Success Arizona, which is an organization led by Rich Nickel, President and CEO, and then Richard Daniel, Executive Vice President and COO. So I just wanted to share a bit about the work that College Success Arizona is doing to support raising FAFSA completion. And one of those ways is through its involvement with Advise AZ, which is a near-peer AmeriCorps program that places current college students and recent college graduates into high schools, college access programs, and nonprofit organizations across the state to serve as college access advisors and mentors who are really guiding high school students through the college exploration process, the application process, and the enrollment process, with the ultimate goal of increasing college going and attainment rates in Arizona. So just a little bit about Advise AZ. Last year, Advise AZ partnered with 33 host sites, including high schools, college access programs, nonprofits, to serve over 50 high schools in 8 counties. And with the support of 65 AmeriCorps members last year, this program assisted over 4,600 high school students navigate the college exploration process, with a specific focus on completing the FAFSA, securing financial aid, and enrolling in college through services such as one-on-one advising and workshops. So the success of last year allowed for Advise AZ to expand and support 85 AmeriCorps members this academic year. And I just wanted to share a couple of highlights from our first year as a program, specifically around FAFSA completion. So of the 50 high schools that had an AmeriCorps member serving at their site, 87% of these schools exceeded the state FAFSA completion average of 46%. The average FAFSA completion rate at these high schools was 56.77%, so nearly 10 percentage points higher than the state average. And the average year-over-year FAFSA completion increase at these high schools from 18-19 academic year to 19-20 was 4 percentage points, which I think is a really exciting piece to highlight with all of the challenges of last academic year. And just a few more pieces. So this is a near peer model with 96% of current AmeriCorps members attending our 3 state institutions. And that's a really exciting piece too, because these students that are going out to serve as AmeriCorps members are often a reflection of the students that we are encouraging and supporting through the college application and enrollment process. And then the last piece I just wanted to share too is that this is also a partnership with the Governor's Office on Youth, Faith, and Family, and Earn to Learn, and the focus, or the high schools that we truly target are Title I high schools across the state. And so with that, I would like to introduce Heidi, who will share about another CSA student-focused initiative that is supporting statewide FAFSA completion too.
Hi, good morning. Brittany, if you want to slide me over to our next slide, please.
Suzanne or Tom, do you mind?
Or Suzanne or Tom?
Moving on to the next slide.
My name is Heidi Doxey. I am at College Success Arizona, and I'm the program manager for community initiatives. And one of the programs that I have been so lucky to work with is our Ask Benji program. It's a community-led program that was originally led by ASU and is managed by College Success Arizona, and was made possible by a grant that our team of ASU, College Success, and some community partners won through the Schmidt Futures Foundation in July of 2019. This program, so it's a FAFSA and financial aid text message-based chatbot, which is a mouthful to say. So basically, it is text message communications with high school seniors and their parents. We have our Benji robot who responds to their questions automatically. We are able to send nudges to those students about events under normal times, virtual events under COVID times, nudges about deadlines or reminders or scholarships or things like that. And then we also have a full-time chatbot manager who helps us writing those outgoing campaigns and then managing some of the incoming questions. We launched Benji in October of 2019 with one pilot school district, Mesa Public Schools. We had about 4,300 seniors, I think, as of right now. A year later, we have 32 signed agreements across the state, with 9 of our 15 counties in Arizona having at least one school participating. Most of those signed agreements are with entire districts. I think at last count, we had, Roxanne, correct me, like 123 high schools or something like that, which is about a quarter of the high schools in Arizona, but we have about half of the Arizona seniors enrolled in Benji. The agreements with the districts include a data sharing component so that we can proactively nudge their students with a message of, hey, I'm Benji, I'm here to help you with FAFSA financial aid, college access, college applications, all of those kinds of pieces. Just this year, we've sent about 500,000 messages, and that's twice what we sent all of last year. So we continue to grow. We get new agreements almost every week with new schools or districts. And particularly exciting is now many of those districts are rural or remote, which is really exciting to have a completely virtual tool to support their students and their counseling staff, actually. We have a lot of counselors texting FAFSA questions to Benji, and Benji doesn't breathe on anyone. So that's really fabulous. He has about 665 topics in his brain. It's called a knowledge base. They are primarily FAFSA financial aid, college scholarships, all Arizona-based, institution agnostic topics. And you can ask, I don't know, one of like 15 questions to get to a specific topic, because there's lots of different ways to ask it the same question, and there's lots of slang and acronyms, and we've taught Benji all of those pieces so that he can best respond to our students. Of our about 32,000 users that we have right now, we do have a lower than average opt-out rate for text message chatbots, which includes wrong numbers, landlines, discontinued numbers, all of those are kind of included. It's about 17% when I checked on Monday, which is really, really exciting. And I think our next slide is a video starring President Crow about Benji. Hopefully it will work. If not, I hope that you can get the link and watch it later. Maybe.
Brittany, I'm not sure that we,
I think we might have to skip that video, unfortunately. Oh, maybe.
I come
Maybe
from a
Tom
low
has
income
it.
family, so I was still stressed out about how am I going to pay for college. I heard that it's like $30,000. No way my family could pay for that.
My biggest obstacle to achieving my college dreams is definitely the finances.
I would say the biggest obstacle is definitely the money. I mean, the thing that people stress about the most is like student loans and how to avoid those.
Well, the key in a place like Arizona, where we have the 49th lowest rate of FAFSA engagement, is to get people aware, to get them on the pathway, to get them while in high school to fill out the FAFSA form. And so what this is a way to empower folks to gain access to these resources.
Benji is an AI system that can answer your FAFSA questions through text. So if you text a certain number and you ask any questions you have about FAFSA, he responds basically immediately, and as more people ask questions, he's able to better answer them.
I feel like Benji has really helped me for paying for college because it really helped me through the process of the FAFSA.
I think Benji is super awesome, and it really does a great job at giving you the information that you need. And I'm excited to see what I can do by the time I graduate.
That video had many of our students from Mesa Public Schools, which was our first kind of pilot project. They were seniors who had tried out Benji, had some of the initial testing of Benji, trying to stump him so that we knew what acronyms and slang we had to teach our robot, actually. So thank you for that. If you've got questions about the bot or the programs, I think Amanda, Andrea, Roxanne, and I are ready to be peppered.
Professor Summers has a comment or question.
Thanks. I had to find my unmute button. Thank you so much to Brittany and the others for this presentation. I am a professor in the College of Education and a former AmeriCorps member, so I enjoyed that part of the presentation. But the point I want to make today is about the school counselor ask to increase the numbers of school counselors in Arizona. I just wanted to say that if we're planning to ask the governor and legislation for funding to increase numbers of school counselors in Arizona, I wanted to make the recommendation to the board and Department of Education that we consult and collaborate with counselor educators on issues of certification, training, and quality assurance, like those faculty in our CACREP accredited program at the University of Arizona. Our UA Counselors Master's Program receives extensive training in mental health counseling, and they are license eligible in addition to the state certification for school counseling. This is an example of the kind of program that I would love to see get state funding for things like scholarships, much like the Arizona Teachers Academy. And I just wanted to say thank you again for this great presentation.
Thanks, Professor Summers. Other questions or comments from members of the board? President Chang.
Thank you. I just wanted to say how appreciative I was for the presentation by the College Success Arizona staff. We host the Arizona State Gear Up program at NAU and have a wonderful FAFSA approach for educating students and working closely with the College Success Arizona folks. We also have that new economy focus on behavioral health in the Department of Education Psychology here at NAU. We launched our new PhD in clinical psychology. We have combined school counseling, school psychology and counseling programs at the PhD and master's level. And we have ed specialists in school psychology certificates as well as master's programs. Our faculty, as Dr. Summers indicates, are advocating for ways to bridge social workers and other paraprofessionals into the clinical and school psychology programs. And I think that this conversation just needs to continue and the numbers of people that we need from the preschool all the way through high school is really important. And the approach of mental health and FAFSA preparation, I think, is truly something that will help us with the attainment issue that we talked about earlier.
Thank you, President Chang. Regent Rusk.
Thank you, Chairman Penley. I just wanted to echo a lot of the same sentiments that were already said today.
and express my appreciation for the focus on Title I schools and rural schools, which really disproportionately affects a lot of our students who may not have the infrastructure, whether it's at home or within their own high schools, to kind of understand what it means to fill out a FAFSA, what does it mean to go to university, or what does it mean to even be on the college track. And so I wanted to express my appreciation. I know that a lot of my colleagues and a lot of my friends who maybe didn't consider high school when they were in, or consider college when they were in high school, would have definitely considered it now with tools like Ask Benji, or with increased amount of counselors for those students. So thank you dearly for this presentation, and thank you dearly for the work that you're doing now.
Brittany, any final comments?
If no one else, and I can't see the hand, so I apologize. If no one else has any other questions, I just want to say thank you. And I think this was just to serve as a preliminary discussion. And as our partners and as our universities, we look to do more in this area. We just hope that the board will be supportive and engaged.
Regent Penley, if I may,
Sure.
Just to continue on Brittany's comments there, we see this as a beginning of a dialogue and about what is needed to improve the outcomes in these areas and how can the regents be supportive on that front, whether it's a legislative ask, if it's partnering in other ways. Has been suggested. So I think we'll be back to the board with these topics and would like to continue to work to really develop some outcomes here.
Thanks, Director Arnold, for that reminder of both where we are and where we're going. So I think it's excellent that you plan more follow-up on this. Brittany, I'm going to return to you, and I believe you're going to discuss with us our 2021 legislative agenda.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Penley. I'm going to discuss 4 items today, many of which you've already seen. But if you're new to the board, it'll be new to you as well. I'm going to discuss all 4 items, and then at the end, we can do one motion or several motions based on the board's discussion. The first item I want to bring to our attention is the optional retirement program. We would like to consider the expansion of that program. All university employees must participate in a retirement plan. Currently, there are 2 options that our employees can choose from, and that is between the Arizona State Retirement System, ASRS, which is a defined benefit plan, and the employee-employer contribution rate of that plan is 12.22%. The other option is ABOR's optional retirement plan, ORP, which is a defined contribution plan, and the employer-employee contribution rate is 7%. Currently, only some classifications of employees based on the job they perform have the choice to participate in ORP. These employees are largely faculty, administrators, and service and academic professionals. The university proposal would open up ORP to all employees. This would have benefits to both the employee and to the university. An employee would be able to decide what retirement plan is best for them, what suits their career and retirement goals, and meets their financial situation. Universities could see some financial relief if more of their employees elect to participate in ORP. This is because if an employee leaves, who participates in ORP and leaves before 5 years, they do not receive the employer contribution. So it does not adversely affect the university budget. However, if an employee elects to participate in ASRS and leaves, the universities do not receive any of their contribution back. The proposal that we would like the board to consider makes 2 prospective changes for future employees. It authorizes any employee of the university to participate in ORP. So they'll still have the choice between ORP or ASRS. ASRS will remain the default for those who do not select a plan. So again, this does not apply to existing employees' elections. All of those are irrevocable because of statutory language. It will also clarify that the forfeited employer contribution for those who do not stay in ORP just in those 5 years, it can only be used to offset future employer contributions, as this is required by federal tax law. So meaning the universities may not use those funds that were set aside for anything other than future retirement contributions. So that is the expansion of ORP. Any questions there? I'll move on to the next item.
Any questions, members of the board? Please proceed, Brittany.
The next item is the psychologist licensure requirements. This has been brought before the board a few times. There are two well-known and respected psychological accreditation bodies. Current statute outlines individuals that graduate from a program accredited by one of these commissions. They're able to automatically meet licensure requirements. Our proposed change would allow graduates from a different accreditation body system to automatically meet the same licensure requirements. So this will create parity between the two accreditation systems and allow the universities flexibility in their programs and how they train their students. This is our fourth or so attempt at the legislation, so we've already had a lot of time educating legislators on the issue. We do believe we've made some progress with the State Examiners Board, and the issue is very timely with the growing mental health crisis, and there's already been some legislator interest in growing the quality and quantity of these clinical scientists. So we would like to pursue this legislation again.
Thank you, Brittany. Let me call on Regent Taylor Robeson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Brittany, I'm curious, what has been the resistance at the legislature? If this is going to be the fourth attempt, I'd just like to better understand the resistance to it.
I think most of the resistance is the board itself, the examiners board. There are some people very, very wed to the current accreditation body and are scared that if we have a second body, we may veer away from the training and program around the first. And if anyone else that's on here wants to join in, but it's largely been the examiners board, the psychological examiners board. And we're not saying this will be an easy lift, but we're hopeful and still think it's an important to attempt.
Thank you.
Please proceed, Brittany.
The next item we've talked, the board has discussed quite a bit over the last few months and regarding century bonds. The Board of Universities have authority under state statute and ABOR policy to issue debt for capital projects. Statutory changes would be necessary to be able to issue debt for purposes other than capital projects. Given the historic low interest rates and ongoing capitalization needs of the universities, ABOR could pursue statutory changes that allow the board and university to issue long-term debt up to 100 years to allow our university to establish a stable, low-cost capitalized reserve for capital projects and strategic initiatives. This debt would also need to be excluded from the current 8% debt ratio limit and would not be used to fund ongoing operational costs. Board policies would also need to be established to govern the issuance of these types of debt and for the use of the resulting capital reserves.
Any questions or comments, board members? Yes, Regent Taylor Robeson.
Regent Robeson, you're on mute.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Brittany, you said that the debt would be used for items other than capital projects?
And I have Lorenzo and John on here, so they can help to them for some of those strategic initiatives, not just capital projects and buildings.
Mr. Chairman, Regent Taylor Robeson, Brittany referenced that our current authority to issue bonds is for capital projects. And if we wanted authority to issue bonds for other than capital projects, we would need to change the statute. And so the intent here would be that this long-term capitalized funding would be available. In our discussions, we've identified two main categories. One is capital needs and strategic initiatives. And so there would be some overlap on the capital piece with existing authority.
Just to clarify, Lorenzo, we're not focusing on operations uses of this. I'm sorry, Regent Taylor Robeson.
Okay. And yes, I would, I want to just make sure that operational requirements would not be met by using these bonds. But my follow-up question is strategic initiatives. How do we define that?
I'll take an initial stab at this, and I'm sure the CFOs will have comments as well. But essentially, I think part of the flexibility of these funds would be able for universities to provide seed money for certain activities. They wouldn't be long-term, annual, ongoing, but they may be a multi-year investment for activities that would have a return on investment for the university. And if I may, I'll back up a little bit on our initial discussions among the CFOs on how this would be structured. Initially, we're thinking two parts to this. One is the statutory change, which would be high-level, flexible language that would allow the board and universities to issue this long-term debt for long-term capitalized funds for things such as strategic initiatives and capital. Again, as Brittany mentioned, this would be excluded from the current debt limits, and it would be excluded from the current limits on maturity terms. Then the second piece to this would be developing those A-board processes for review and approval. And that we're currently envisioning to be a two-step process where the board would need to approve the initial issuance of these long-term bonds. And then we would identify the type of information that would need to come to the board at that point. And then the second piece of review and approval would be that the board would need to approve any uses from those funds once they've been issued. And again, we would identify the type of information that would need to come to the board when those funds would be used.
If I can just add to that, Regent Penley and Regent Taylor Robeson, as you and I have discussed, we can include in any legislative endeavors clear prohibitions against operational use for these proceeds.
Yes, thanks, John.
I
apologize that I steered away from your original question, but in our discussions, yes, we would make it clear that these funds are not intended or prohibited from being used for annual ongoing expenditures, operating expenditures.
Regent Taylor Robeson.
Yes, and I just want to, say, we're in a situation where we have historic low interest rates. And so I think it's prudent for us to pursue this and consider this with the appropriate limitations that we've just discussed. But one of the follow-up questions I have for Lorenzo is why would these be excluded from current debt limits? Our universities have done a very good job relative to those debt limits. So why would these be excluded?
Mr. Chair, Regent Taylor Robeson, currently that debt limit is 8%. And given the magnitude of the issuances we're talking about, they would, if we issued at that level, the 8% limit would be excluded. And so we can talk about increasing that 8% limit to a higher, to a more appropriate if we include this category in that limit. But we do have other instances of debt issuances that are excluded from that limit, primarily what we call the speed bonds that are funded from lottery revenues we receive. So we just viewed it as a simpler approach to exclude this from the 8% limit.
Great. Thank you, Lorenzo. President Crow, did you have a comment on that?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to Regent Taylor Robeson's comments. We have complete agreement in the notion of not using debt to finance operating dollars and being fiscally responsible. I'm going to just give a general statement here and then turn just for a comment to Morgan Olson, one of academia's most experienced and distinguished CFOs out there, given all of his experience running several institutions, public and private. We are severely hampered by the archaic structure of Arizona government, the models, the financial structures, the mechanisms. At Ohio State, my counterpart went out and got a 100-year bond, borrowed money over a 100-year time frame, pooled that money together to use it to then mount a financial response to a massive strategic opportunity that involves ultimately the building of new assets, the purchasing of equipment, the setting up of laboratories, computers, everything that you can possibly imagine. And so you have to imagine, for the sake of argument, that, and I mentioned this to the regents before, and I know you support this at the conceptual level, we have no access to capital markets. We have no access to debt markets except for discrete projects per se. And so within the constraint of not becoming reliant on debt financing for operations, which I agree with 100%, we're looking to find financial structures that are more sophisticated, more adaptable, and more modern. And so, Morgan, if I might call on you, Mr. Chairman, is it all right if I call on Morgan to give some additional financial background?
Of course. Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Many of the uses that we would like to make of these strategies have already been mentioned, but I'll just briefly touch on them. As Dr. Crow indicated, this would be an equity-like source of capitalization for the institutions over the long term. So it's about the capital structure of the institution and enhancing the capability of the institution to achieve its mission, at a very high level. Each of the universities maintains an internal bank, and as Regent Taylor Robeson indicated, we would hope to use this in a very targeted, well-timed way so that we'd be able to lock in low cost of capital funds that would then be available to the university over a longer time period, which essentially just stretches our capability to accomplish things in the way of the university's mission, whether it's capital projects or strategic types of investments. It also would serve as an inflation hedge in the same context, in that we would then be paying back these funds that have been borrowed over a long term with inflated dollars. So there's an arbitrage opportunity there, as well as investing proceeds and then using the investment return to help offset those initial capital costs. So, sophisticated institutions across the country, public universities are doing this. We want to be careful about how we implement it. And the thing that I would emphasize here is that the board has complete control. Typically, when we bring to the board a proposal, right now it's about capital projects, but you see the plan that we have, the plan of finance, where the money would come from, how it would be spent, and you decide whether you think it's an appropriate strategy, just as you do with so many other things that are approved by the board. And the intent is that would remain exactly the same. You would have that opportunity to review it. We've been talking with John Arnold and staff about, how we would adjust, expand, board processes, approval processes to make sure that you have the information that you need to feel comfortable that, we have a good plan and that it's being followed appropriately. And so our intent would be, if you decide to forward this, would be to work on defining the details of that plan to ensure that the things we were doing are truly strategic and not simply sort of a financial crunch, which I don't think any of the CFOs are in favor of. So our focus is really strategic here, and we want to have a process that allows us to evidence that for the board, and then you have the opportunity to make a decision about whether we move forward.
And let me add, for the benefit of just as an example of a strategic initiative. So we have one of the most significant projects that we've ever worked on in our history underway right now, which is codenamed MACS, M-A-C-S. It's our effort to crack the code on teaching math to everyone, so that math can be eliminated as a barrier to forward movement in our both in our population, college students, high school students, and so forth and so on. Let's say, for the sake of argument, that our planning efforts, which we're deeply involved in right now, tell us that we need to purchase, I don't know, $100 million supercomputer with unbelievable ability that then allows us to launch, which you can capitalize or amortize over 10 years. We don't have a source for that $100 million device right now. That $100 million device then is the strategic asset that we need to advance the institution into a whole new thing. It's not related to our operations. It's related to this physicality that we need to acquire. And so I won't walk you through all the possibilities that this brings to bear, but I would ask Morgan to just say one other thing. Back in March, at the beginning of the pandemic, Harvard University, which is one of the a AAA bond rated institution, went to the market for $2 billion of debt. they didn't have any immediate need for the debt. They wanted to strengthen their financial position. They didn't want to spend any of the debt on operations. They wanted the debt to be able to strengthen their ability to adapt fiscally. So Morgan, could you talk about what that maneuver by Harvard, and then why would Ohio State or Penn State or other big, massive public universities take on these 100-year bonding challenges? Why would they do that? And you were a Big Ten CFO yourself. You were CFO at a private university. I want you to comment relative to the term I used. You might not use the same term, archaic structure that we live in. We live in an antiquated, archaic financial structure that we're trying to advance these universities in. So Morgan, if you could just bring a little more detail here.
Sure. So, what we're seeing in the marketplace for nonprofit higher education institutions is increased use of taxable municipal bonds. And the reason that institutions do that is because it provides additional flexibility in terms of how those proceeds are used. Similarly, this concept that we're talking about would provide some additional flexibility to be more opportunistic. So, for example, we are at almost historic lows in terms of the cost of capital available to higher education institutions. Of course, an institution has to have strong credit ratings, and you have to have a sound plan, just as we would have to explain that plan to the Board of Regents. They're also rating agencies, Standard & Poor's, Moody's, et cetera, and they would be vitally interested in what our plan was and the impacts that it would have on the capital structure of the institution, the ability to service our debt, the capabilities that it would provide, et cetera. And so, not all plans are good ones, but what you see is large, sophisticated institutions with which we compete. I think President Crow mentioned some of them: Pittsburgh, Virginia, Rutgers, the University of California system, Ohio State, have all been active in this marketplace in the last few years. What tends to happen is when we there are cycles, economic cycles, and with them there are changes in the cost of capital, cost of debt in this case. And when those reach a low point, that's sort of an opportunity, if you have the right tools available to you and the institutional capacity, of course, to capture that low cost of capital, which then means that you can deploy strategies over a period of time more cost effectively, which of course we're all vitally interested in doing, is making sure that we're highly cost-effective institutions so that we can keep down the price and the cost of higher education, to our stakeholders. So what this is really about is another tool that is available to other institutions with which we compete, and it translates into capacities like President Crow is talking about, or the ability to equip laboratories or to provide facilities that leading edge scholars expect, and if you're going to be successful in recruiting them, you're going to have to be able to compete with the other institutions that are trying to retain their talents. And so these are the types of things that we're talking about here. Currently this is a good time to do it. If the capital markets change and all of a sudden interest rates, went up 300 or 400 basis points, we probably would say, well, it's a good thing to have in the toolbox, but we're not going to use that particular tool at this point. And that's the sort of discussion that we would anticipate having with the board around these strategies if you see fit to forward it.
Thanks, Morgan. Thank you, President Crow. Board members, any other questions or comments on this issue? Yes, President Robbins.
I know we're up against time here, and I'm not a board member, but I just wanted to voice my support for this. And we have a good roadmap for what strategic investments we would use. We have a newly developed strategic plan. It's not new anymore, but we had to pause investment in the strategic plan. We're revisiting that, but clearly, one of the hallmarks of our strategic plan was student success, many of the things we've been talking about all day. So it would give us some degrees of freedom to invest in things like our strategic plan.
Thanks, President Robbins, for bringing that back to the strategy issue. I think that President Crow also discussed as well. Regent Ridenour?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this dovetails with our discussion this morning about attainment. And attainment is directly related to resources. and the state investment or lack thereof in the university system. I think this is one of the things that the Board of Regents can tackle to make a difference, perhaps in that attainment goal that we all have. I think this is a critical requirement just to place us on a level playing field. And I would kick this particular item right to the front of our legislative agenda. I mean, some of the others are fine and we ought to pursue, but I think this is critical going forward.
Thank you, Regent Ridenour. Lorenzo, any other final comment before I return to Brittany for the last item?
No, Chairman, I'm available
Thanks.
for questions.
Thank you, Lorenzo. Brittany, the last item then on our legislative agenda.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. The last item is regarding the Arizona Teachers Academy. Every year we're here making tweaks, but with the passage of Proposition 208, which included the Arizona Teachers Academy, we need to make some clarifications and some forming changes. Specifically, the change we're asking is to clarify that part-time students are eligible. We believe the way the initiative, or now soon to be law, is worded, that would exclude part-time students. So we do believe this would further the intent of the initiative, and we would like to pursue that change. Impacts the community college greatly, as well as our graduate programs as well.
Thank you very much, Brittany, for that presentation. Unless there are any objections from members of the board, I'm going to treat all four of these legislative items as one motion. And those include, just to remind you, the expansion of the optional retirement plan, the psychological licensure requirements, the century bonds, and the issues of conformity and clarification of the Arizona Teachers Academy. So unless I hear an objection, I'm going to proceed with a single motion. I move that the board, as part of its 2021 legislative agenda, support the expansion of the ABOR optional retirement plan, psychologist licensure requirements, century bonding, and necessary clarifications and conformity measures for the Arizona Teachers Academy. As part of the 2021 legislative agenda, the board will also participate in finding policy solutions to address the Arizona high school counseling shortage. Do I have a second?
Second.
I hear a second from Regent Schutman. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any members opposed? Any abstentions? That motion does pass. Thank you very much, Brittany. As we close out this part of our meeting this morning, I just want to go back to the chat box named Benji and to the other efforts that ASU has really made to really broaden opportunity for high school students to complete their degrees. This is a public meeting, and I think it's worth the opportunity from this board to encourage our high school superintendents, our boards around the state, and schools themselves, principals as well, to take advantage of what has been created that will raise attainment in our high schools across the country by both helping students to complete their high school degrees and then going on with financial support to achieve either an associate's degree or preferably a bachelor's degree, in light of what Executive Director John Arnold noted much earlier in this meeting, that the jobs that lie ahead of us, 50% of them will require a baccalaureate degree. Those jobs are increasingly technical and require technical skills that are provided through the educational experience at our three public universities. So with that final comment at this point, we're going to recess until about 11:20, and then we'll get right back underway. So it's 11:05 now. Let's take a 15-minute break.
Thank you, sir.
Susanna, are we ready to get started again?
Yes, Chair Penley, we're set.
Okay, thank you very much, Suzanne. The next thing we're going to discuss is approval of the NAU presidential leadership characteristics. And I'm going to turn to Chad Sampson, whom I believe will present this item. Right, Chad?
That is correct, Chair. Appreciate it very much. Regent Penley, other regents, quickly, as part of every presidential search, the board is asked to adopt leadership characteristics for the position that you're looking to hire. These particular leadership characteristics have been under the leadership of Regents Duvall and Manson, vetted through the community, listening to regential comments and thoughts, and through the significant information that has been provided through community input and discussions at 2 search advisory committee meetings, along with input and language provided by Alberto Pimentel, who is the lead consultant from our search consultant in this search. The search co-chairs have worked to develop this list of leadership characteristics that is in the board packet for board adoption. We present these to the board today, and I stand for questions.
Members of the board, do you have any questions for Chad or for Regents Duvall and Manson? Hearing none, I move that the board approve the Northern Arizona University presidential leadership characteristics as presented. Do I have a second?
Second.
We do have a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion does pass. Thank you very much, Chad, and thanks for the work of Regents Manson and Duvall, who've had many community meetings at this point, including those on campus and off, as well as talking to a variety of individuals who have an interest, as all of us do on this board, in the next president and the kind of president that we'll have at Northern Arizona University. The next item on our agenda is the Arizona Innovation Alliance. Let me just give some background, and then I'm going to turn to either President Crow or Rich Stanley at ASU to make a comment or two. Over the course of the years of this board, we've both called on our universities to differentiate themselves, to do their best to distinguish themselves from one another, and better serve the state of Arizona by that differentiation. At the same time, we've also, and this has been especially true during COVID-19, the pandemic, we've asked our universities to share good ideas, to collaborate with one another where they can, and to work with one another to really share the kind of innovations that come about at each of our 3 public universities. I've listened to board members at various times who've said, well, why can't we do that at the other universities as well as at this university? Why can't we share that information? At the same time that we've asked those questions, I was aware, and President Crow has helped me to better understand the University Alliance that exists among various universities across the country to provide share innovations and really improve student attainment across those universities. What we are proposing here today is an Arizona Innovation Alliance that draws our 3 universities together in a way that increases their collaboration around innovations and around ways that will better serve the state of Arizona. With that introductory comment, I don't know whether President Crow, you have a comment or two, or Rich Stanley, but the board members should know that John Arnold and I have met with the 3 presidents and with other staff members at the 3 universities, and we've received support from the universities for the Arizona Innovation Alliance. President Crow or Rich Stanley?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll go first and then turn it over to Rich. America has great colleges and great universities, but in many cases, particularly among the publics, particularly the publics that don't admit only A+ level students from high school or don't admit very many Pell eligible students. There's major American public research universities that have less than 15% of their student body as Pell eligible in states where more than half the population is Pell eligible. And so that's a complete, in many ways, miscarriage of social purpose. So about 6 years ago, I designed a thing called the University Innovation Alliance and secured 10 partners, Michigan State, Ohio State, Purdue, Florida, or Central Florida, Georgia State, Iowa State, Oregon State, UC Riverside, University of Kansas, University of Texas. And the reason we went to these other major public universities was that they all had a deep commitment to success for students from every family background. And they all had a deep commitment to the public purpose of a public university, which was to scale and be responsive to social complexities while also either carrying out massive research agendas or building significant research trajectories. At the time, we designed this in a way where all 11 universities, which represent about 500,000 students, would all be in different states so that we could avoid all of the complexities of intra-state rivalries and intra-state fund fights and all these other kinds of things. And so we put this together. We got a handful of foundations led by the Gates Foundation and a few others to launch us. And we have 4 objectives in this University Innovation Alliance over the last 5 years. I serve as the chairman of this. 1, can we produce more college graduates, period? That is, can we enhance the throughput through the universities without having to build more universities to produce more graduates? 2nd, could we in particular produce more graduates from Pell eligible families? That's families with basically lower middle class, working class, and working poor family incomes. Could we produce more graduates because students from those families have a very low graduation rate? 3, could we actually learn how to innovate together? Could we open up the hoods of all 11 schools, look into the engine compartments, and share ideas about how we might innovate together? Something that literally, that may be the most significant innovation in and of itself, just being willing to do that. And then lastly, could those things together help us to shape a lower cost? Could we contain the costs or control the rising costs for public higher education? 5 years into this, we have increased against our predicted trajectory by more than 30% the number of Pell eligible graduates, just to give you some sense of how that's worked. The schools have learned how to work together to exchange innovations, and Regents would laugh at some of the silly innovations that we learn from each other. I mean, I'm not even going to move you into the comic mode of understanding how archaic and Byzantine universities are. But when you break down that, you learn, for instance, as we learned from Michigan State University, that one of the reasons they were getting lower success from their Pell eligible students was that the universities were overwhelming families with dozens or hundreds of email messages, overwhelming the families so much that the student either didn't show up to college after being admitted or dropped out soon after being admitted because they were just overwhelmed by the engagement with the university and the bureaucracy and the rules and the mechanisms and so forth. So we learned from that, and that would be one of dozens or hundreds of things that we learned. We structure the alliance, the University Innovation Alliance, which is continuing. We're just adding Rutgers University. We're adding North Carolina A&T as our first HBCU. We're adding University of Maryland, Baltimore County, and we're adding the University of Houston, again, staying with one university per state model. And University of Texas is leaving. They decided in Austin that they don't need to innovate with anyone else because they're smarter than everyone else. And so they're just heading off on their own, and we're saying goodbye. And so the point is that the University Innovation Alliance is continuing. And the way that it works is that we have a very small staff, and we have a director, and then we have innovation fellows, a top-notch, newly minted thinker just coming out of graduate school or just emerging out of the Vanderbilt School or the Kennedy School or the Harvard Education School or the some fantastic policy or education school, and we bring one of those to each campus. And then those folks help drive the innovations between the campuses. Then we have what's called a liaison, which is a senior officer of each university that works with the presidents to help stimulate and drive the innovation forward. And Rich Stanley is our liaison, among many, many other things that he does at ASU for the University Innovation Alliance. And then we have projects and project funding and project ways that we make things happen. And so I'm going to let Rich describe what we're going to do here, but I want to tell you that the University Innovation Alliance, over now approaching 6 years, has been an effective way for us at ASU to both share innovations, learn of additional innovations, compare and contrast what different universities do, and to also help uptick all of our performance. All of the universities in the University Innovation Alliance are at least as different as the 3 universities in the Arizona Innovation Alliance. The University of Kansas, for instance, admits every high school graduate from Kansas, period. That's one of the old, traditional, most difficult things you could possibly do, and they're hard at it. University of Texas at Austin only admits students from the upper 6% of the high school class. Arizona State admits every qualified student at the old University of California model, et cetera. So all these schools are different, just like the 3 schools in Arizona are different. So Rich Stanley has agreed to help honcho all of this from his role as senior vice president and university planner, but taking off his ASU hat and now wearing a regent's hat, wearing an enterprise-wide hat to help make this work. And so, Rich, why don't you talk about what we're talking about for the Arizona Innovation Alliance, and then we can come back and answer questions about either the University Innovation Alliance or the Arizona Innovation Alliance. And you're muted.
The intent is to use many of the same tools that we have used in the University Innovation Alliance. I think many of the goals that we will have will be similar to those that were set for the University Innovation Alliance, but I also think that there will be ones that will go beyond that and will become more Arizona specific. But to set those, I'd like to be able to sit down with the presidents and with the representatives from the other 2 universities and work on them together rather than just say what they are on the first moment. As a structure, we will have each university will appoint a liaison who will be a senior member of the staff. And it'll just become one of their additional duties in addition to whatever they do on a day-to-day basis. We will appoint a project, an alliance coordinator who will be someone who is whose responsibility is to worry about making sure that the alliance is communicating and is holding events and meetings and talking on a regular basis. And then we will appoint a fellow at each university who will be, as President Crow described, generally a younger person who is interested in university administration or is moving out of a more junior position in university administration, who will work on an hour-by-hour basis to both implement the innovations that are discussed and to share the innovations with the members of the other institution. The regents today will be asked to approve the funding for those fellow positions and for the alliance coordinator position. The others are designed to be contributions that the universities make of existing staff members to support the organization. My experience with the University Innovation Alliance is that it's hard to predict what will come out of these kinds of conversations. Once within the alliance, we got to the point of knowing each other just a little bit and trusting each other just a little bit. The discussions, some of them were around specific projects, some of them were around specific techniques for finding problems, design thinking techniques, and others were just conversations that went in odd directions that we learned things just as a result of just talking on an informal basis or about things that are going on at our university. I expect the same kind of thing is going to happen among the 3 of us, although I think the one thing which we do know is we know each other a lot better than we knew Central Florida or we knew Georgia State in the University Innovation Alliance when we first started. We'll see whether we trust each other. I hope we do. And I think the conversation we've had with the presidents indicates that there's a good chance that we will be able to do that. And I'm looking forward to what should be a very interesting startup and then ongoing process.
To our earlier comment relative to college attainment in Arizona and so forth and so on, I certainly, as a driver of this idea, my fellow presidents, I'm sure, would agree. If we can't get a 30% improvement in Pell eligible outcomes, then get rid of us. Find people who can. And so what we're looking at is how do we continue to hone and improve in every possible way how our three universities are achieving our social objectives and our overall objectives for the state. And we can't do that without sharing our innovations and working back and forth with each other. And this should be easier because we're all siblings. And so we fight like siblings, that's fine, but we're still a family. These other guys, these other 10 schools I've been working with, this ain't no family. This has been a hard assignment, making this thing work. Luckily, we have hundreds or thousands of miles between us, so I don't have to see their faces every day. And so because it's just a little bit harder. So this is going to be, we think, easier. And we think we can take the experiences and learn from what's been done. We can also take the cumulative insights that we've learned from the University Innovation Alliance, put those on the table and see how many of those work. Also, that is, we can take the work of the other 10 schools and put those on the table for all the Arizona schools and see how those help us.
Thanks, President Crow, and thanks, Rich. Comments from President Chang or President Robbins?
Thank you, Regent Penley. I'm very proud of the progress that NAU has made over recent years in improving the traditional metrics of retention and completion for our Pell students, our underrepresented students, and our first generation students. As you know, we have received some recent national attention for that success. But it is very, very hard work inside of the campus, and a collaboration like this, comparing best practices, talking through initiatives with colleagues across the state will allow us to advance even more. So I look forward to this collaboration, and I do think that the focus on outcomes, the focus on student success is everything that we all three of us are about. So thank you.
Thanks, President Chang. President Robbins, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I would agree. As I said before, our whole strategic plan, the main thrust of it is around student success, and would agree with President Crow and President Chang. We've made progress. Good enough's not good enough. We've got to continue to improve, particularly in our Pell eligible students. And I'm just appreciative to Michael and Rich for allowing us in their club. It'll be interesting to learn what Texas did inside their system and what goes on inside the UC system and even the Cal State system. But I'd be probably more interested in the UC system around these sharing of ideas and best practices to improve the success of our students, particularly our most vulnerable students that need us the most.
Thanks, President Robbins. If I could turn to the regents, do you have questions or comments?
Thank you. I think I want to just express my encouragement and enthusiasm for this. I think that this has a tremendous opportunity to help with the state goals and our attainment goals, and sharing this type of information within our system and working to make everybody better is certainly one of our objectives and one of the reasons that we have an enterprise system. And so I'm enthusiastic about this. Thank you.
Thanks, Regent Manson. Regent Schupman?
Yes, I echo Regent Manson, and I really appreciate President Crow and Chair Penley for leading us to this point. And I especially thank President Chang and President Robbins for being open to the idea. I see this as the potential of being far greater than the University Alliance that ASU has made so successful. because we're dealing with such common problems of low attainment, funding from our state, there are just so many issues that this has the potential to help us address more effectively. I believe it'll help not only the 3 universities, but this board in taking the right kind of policy actions and steps we need to support the kinds of measurable improvement that could be possible as a result. So I'm thrilled. I think it's one of the best things I've seen in a long time for us. So thank you.
Thank you, Regent Schupman. Any other comments, President Crow?
The only other thing I would say is that it is a humbling experience even for us at ASU. And what I mean by that, to look at what some of these other schools have been able to do. So the University of Texas at Austin, for instance, has unbelievable transformation in their performance, admittedly only taking the top students from high schools, but with wide variability between those students in the high school. They have 1,000 more students graduating faster. That's allowed them to expand their freshman class to to greatly enhance their throughput while managing this model. So humbling means, you look at sometimes what other people are doing and you're like, well, how stupid could we have been not to have thought of that? Or why haven't we been doing this? Or maybe we should work with these guys on that. And so I just think there's huge opportunity here. So to the comments from Regent Manson and Regent Schupman, we just need to get in it. It's kind of a weird kind of process of, making sausage here, and we got to get into it.
Thank you, President Crow. And Rich, I just want to say a special thanks to you. You've dealt with the operations of the University Alliance among the various schools there. You bring a great deal of knowledge and capability to our making this work inside Arizona. There's a reason, I believe, and President Crow and I've talked about this, that you don't see intra-state, single state collaborations among public universities. All you have to do is look to where I was at Colorado and see the football and the other kind of competition between Colorado and Colorado State, to Michigan and Michigan State, and certainly to Texas and Texas A&M, or North Carolina and NC State, where I went to school in that state. This is not a common thing. We carry forward these athletic competitions and limit ourselves in really working together in other ways. So I just want to laud all 3 presidents for their willingness to take this on and to make it work and become, insofar as we know, I don't think I'm wrong on this, President Crow, this is the first occasion that we've seen this type of alliance among all of the public universities in any state in our country. Is that fair?
Yeah, this is the first one, and we hope that it will then set the example for this to go on in other states also, particularly when we show the progress that we make.
Thanks very much. This is a discussion item, and I appreciate the time we've spent on it. Let me turn to John Arnold, who's now going to present the proposed allocation of TRIF revenues that have exceeded the FY 2020 TRIF budget. Executive Director Arnold.
Thank you, Regent Penley. And this is one of the action items related to the Arizona Innovation Alliance. So grateful for that. TRIF revenues exceeded budget by $8.2 million in 2020. Very exciting for us. And so we are coming to you to allocate a portion of those funds. There are 5 areas where we want to do an allocation. Number 1 is $450,000 to PBC. This will provide startup funds for the executive director position that we established last year. Right now, ASU is serving as the fiduciary for that position. And so these funds will be distributed through ASU, but this will fund the executive director position for the next 2 years and give that position a little bit of a budget and to start up that office. The next 3 items are all board initiatives. These dollars would come to the board office. Number 1, funding to establish a general education assessment. This is part of the general education reform that the board has been working on for the last year plus, 2 years. The next step is to develop an assessment tool so we can see the outcomes of these reforms. There's a tri-university work group along with the board office that's working on this, and these funds would support the work of that group. An attainment study, as we talked earlier this morning, these dollars would be used to develop and execute a scholarly study on the K-12 pipeline. We do believe we have developed the data where we can execute this type of study, and really for the first time in Arizona's history. And so we want to allocate some dollars towards that and then work with the universities to put that study together. And then some funding on a workforce study. We've been working with Jim Rounds to develop an economic study that looks at Arizona's workforce needs for the next 20 years. And how, and specifically the educational attainment requirements for that workforce, how our workforce compares to other states, and then to look at the historic strategy of importing educational attainment into our state to meet our economic demands, and whether that is a viable strategy moving forward with the demographic changes. We are still noodling around the specific scope of work on that study, but would really like to launch that in the near term. And finally, we'd like to allocate some funds for the Innovation Alliance. As Rich Stanley discussed, these funds will support the project coordinator and the fellow positions at the universities. With that, if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Are there questions or comments from members of the board?
John, did you keep that pizza budget number in the alliance? Because it's all about pizza and getting together. So
that's approximately 2/3 of the budget for the
All right, joking aside, the two of you, Regent Taylor Robeson does have a substantive comment here.
Yeah, well, I hope I didn't just miss it in John's presentation, but the revenues outperformed by 8.2 million, and this request is for 1.8. Where's the rest of it going?
Great question, Regent Taylor Robeson, and we have not come up with a proposal for the balance of those funds as of yet. We have discussed distributing the balance of the dollars to the universities for TRIF-related projects, but have not reached agreement on that yet. And so I think we'll be back in the next few weeks, months to allocate the balance of the funds.
I'm confident there's no shortage of areas that those funds can be allocated.
There is no shortage of needs, and frankly, we would like to finalize this sooner rather than later so we can put those funds to work.
Thank you.
And we are all nodding with you, Regent Taylor Robeson, about the needs, including our three presidents. Any other comments or questions from members of the board? If not, I move that the board approve the proposed allocation of TRIF revenues that exceeded the FY 2020 TRIF budget as presented by Executive Director Arnold. Do I have a second?
Second.
I do have a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion does pass. Next, Arizona State University, Northern Arizona University, and the University of Arizona request that the board ratify the prior authorization for ASU, NAU, and the University of Arizona to initiate litigation against the Department of Labor's new interim rule on prevailing wage and against the Department of Homeland Security's new rule narrowing eligibility of H-1B visas. Jennifer Pollack, our general counsel, and Lisa Liu from Arizona State University will present.
Thank you, Chairman Penley and members of the board. As Chairman Penley indicated, this action is a request by the universities for ratification ratification of the prior authorization for the universities to initiate litigation against the Department of Labor and its new interim rule on prevailing wage, and against the Department of Homeland Security's new rule on narrowing eligibility for H-1B visas. This is pursuant to Board Policy 1-109, and and the background is provided in your executive summary. But just a little information, in October, the Department of Labor promulgated and implemented an interim rule without comment. Those rules set forth new levels for determining wages for H-1B visas and permanent residency applications based on labor certification. The new salary levels would require significant salary increases when hiring new employees and when retaining current employees who need to renew their visas. In addition, in October, the Department of Homeland Security announced a new rule that changes the definition of a specialty occupation. The new rule would require that H-1B beneficiary have a degree that's directly related to the position which they will be hired for, and degrees that are in a wide variety of fields would be unacceptable, and general degrees without further specialization are also unacceptable. And this will cause issue for those positions for which a number of different kinds of degrees and experience would qualify a person for a specialty occupation at the universities. The universities received prior authorization from me in consultation with the board chair to initiate the litigation, and that authorization is subject to ratification by the board pursuant to board policy. Again, Lisa Liu is also available if there are specific questions about this litigation. We're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Jenny. Do we have questions from the board members? Hearing none and seeing none, I move that the board ratify the prior authorization for ASU, NAU, and the U of A to initiate litigation against the Department of Labor's new interim rule on prevailing wages and against the Department of Homeland Security's new rule narrowing eligibility for H-1B visas. Do I have a second?
Second.
I hear a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion does pass. Next on the agenda is the approval of a multi-year employment contract for the Vice President for Intercollegiate Athletics at Northern Arizona University. And President Chang, I'm going to turn to you to present this item.
Thank you, Regent Penley. Mike Marlowe joined Northern Arizona University in January of 2018 from the Washington State University Athletic Department. He has made an immediate and significant impact on NAU's athletics to date, with many impressive accomplishments. Mike brought to the position an aggressive agenda focused on addressing student performance among all of our student athletes, creating an inclusive and integrated athletic and student experience, building and growing the philanthropic engagement among the lumberjack community. And he has recruited and retained exceptional student athletes, coaches, and more. His track record has been impressive in the short time he's been here. NAU student athletes achieved the highest cumulative GPA in a lumberjack history in 2018-19. NAU achieved a 60% growth in philanthropic contributions and a 66% increase in the number of donors from 2018 to 2020. And athletics surpassed the $1 million mark in fundraising for the first time ever. I know you are aware that NAU's cross-country team has 2 Division I national titles. And in 2018, in the fall of 18, they came up as runners-up for that program. And I've never seen a more disappointed team being second in the country. We will be competing again at Oklahoma State in March, and I anticipate great outcomes. 16 head coaches have been named Conference, Regional, and National Coach of the Year during Mike's tenure at NAU. In addition, NAU's programs have won 15 conference regular season and postseason team championships, as well as 3 national championships, 1 team and 2 individual. Mike spearheaded the Student Athlete High Performance Center project at NAU, which will provide a world-class, high-altitude, high-performance center for NAU student athletes and construction began earlier this year. And when we can all get together, I know you will be proud of the work that's being done there. And I know our coaches and our community will express to you their pride in that engagement. So I could go on. Mike has been a tremendous member of the NAU team, a part of my executive team, and that has been since day one. And I'm pleased to count him as a member of our Lumberjack family. We are asking for an extension of his contract for 1 year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, President Chang, and congratulations to you, Mike, as well on the success. The graduation success rate has indeed improved at NAU. In fact, it has improved at all 3 of our universities. So this just goes to show you that all of you, Mike Marlowe, as well as your colleagues at the other 2 institutions, are really focusing not just on athletic success, although we're always happy to see that, but also on the academic success of our students as well. Both go together, and I just want to thank you, Mike, for what you're doing on that front. Any comments or questions from members of the board? Regent Ridenour.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to thank President Chang and all the people at NAU for this hire. I think it was a wonderful hire. I hope Mike's on the line and can hear this. I think a lot of progress has been made in the NAU athletic department. I'm looking forward to their multi-purpose facility and how that integrates into the campus. So I'd just like to congratulate Mike and again express what a wonderful hire that was.
And Mike is right there in front of us. Right, Mike?
Yes, thank you, Regent Ridenour. Thank you, Chairman Penley and members of the board. I guess I would just want you to know how proud we are of all of our student athletes, coaches, and staff on how they've adapted to these difficult times. It hasn't been easy, but their work ethic remains strong and their determination has not flinched. I'd also like to take the opportunity to acknowledge the understanding amongst our coaches and staff and all 400 student athletes that you can't have success in intercollegiate athletics without the leadership of the president. And unanimously, we appreciate all the support, not just on our campus, but at the conference level and the national level that President Chang has provided to us and all of our young people. So thank you, President Chang.
Thanks, Mike. I move that the board approve a 1-year contract extension for Michael Marlowe as Vice President for Intercollegiate Athletics. Do I have a second?
I second.
I hear a second, I believe, right?
Yes.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion does pass. Mike, we look forward to seeing the great work out of you as hopefully we begin to have more athletic events down the road.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike, for everything that you do. The next item on our agenda of the board is to recognize and approve payment for achievement of the 2017-2020 at-risk compensation goals assigned to President Chang and President Robbins. Nancy Tribbinsey will present this item. Nancy.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, thank you. The board has structured presidential compensation in 2 parts. One part is their base salary, and the other part is compensation that is at risk, which means that the presidents do not receive that at-risk portion of their compensation unless they achieve strategic goals that have been identified, very specific goals that have been identified by the board and assigned to the presidents. Those assignments are included in their contracts, and the presidents use those assignments to focus the attention of their teams who are also performing all their normal duties and including all the additional duties in this past year. The 2017-2020 goals that were achieved by President Chang and President Robbins are highlighted in your executive summary. President Crow will undergo a review of his assignments next year, so he's not due for review this year. Today, the board is asked to authorize payment for the at-risk goals that were achieved by President Robbins and President Chang. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Nancy. Do we have questions from members of the board? Hearing no questions, I move that the board approve payment for the achievement of 2017-2020 at-risk compensation goals assigned to President Chang and President Robbins as outlined in the executive summary. Do I have a second?
Second.
I do hear a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? This motion does pass.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nancy. The next item on our agenda is the Student Regent Report and the report from the Arizona Faculty's Council. I'm going to ask that both our student regents as well as our faculty council representative stick to the time limits that you've been provided and move through your reports as speedily as you can. With that, I'm going to turn to our two student regents, Regent Rusk and Regent Dave.
Thank you, Chairman Penley, for the introduction, and thank you for the board for having us today and letting us talk a little bit about some of the issues and some updates that we have from the board today. So if we actually get to the next slide. So first update that we wanted to talk about a little bit is the Basic Need Coalition updates. So the board is well aware of what the working group is doing at the board level. However, at the individual university levels, Nikhil and I have begun to have conversations with the individual universities and individual stakeholders at those universities to kind of break down a lot of those silos. And when we talk about breaking down the silos, what we essentially mean by this is there's a lot of repetitive work that is happening across the different branches. The same things that are being done, for example, at DOS might be done at the retention level or might be done under a different branch. And so making sure that all of the stakeholders are in the same room, having those conversations to ensure that there isn't the repetition of work being done. And there's more of a collaborative effort on our universities to address a lot of these issues that primarily affect marginalized students and more particularly our Pell Grant and BIPOC students. With these meetings, we've been seeing a lot of really interesting things. Most of which is that a lot of our faculty members are unaware of what other faculty members are doing to address a lot of these same issues. These conversations have been largely beneficial and have been working really to inform what we're doing at the working group level. And so we'd like to also give a huge thank you to the various different Basic Need Coalition members at the University of Arizona. We have about 10 members now. We recently met with ASU members and we're working on creating the same sort of infrastructure at NAU. All of the members have been extremely ecstatic about the work we're doing so far, discussing what the different definitions of basic need and security looks like, what are all the issues that we want to tackle at our universities, and what are the best practices. Some of the issues that have already come up is that the best practices are relatively limited across the nation. We're not entirely sure what works best for the universities, what works best to support these students, how we could best use our dollars to influence change at the university level. And so a lot of these conversations have really been trying to discover what is the best foot forward and what is the pathway and strategy that we can start to take to really affect these students. Next slide, please. As mentioned before, the working group has had their first meeting. Our first meeting was essentially just discussing who everyone is at the level, discussing what the definitions are for food and housing insecurity, and then discussing lastly what the path forward is. So far, we've determined that we need more data. For this entire mission to be even somewhat plausible and for this to be an effective use of our time, we need more data to understand who of our students are struggling, how can we best help those students, and then what can we best do to ensure that the students that we're actually helping are getting the help that we need. We're discussing sending out a survey by February and are discussing what we can do next to ensure that the most amount of students are responding and the different survey techniques. Our next meeting will involve a lot of the university data specialists to discuss what they believe would be the best foot forward in when we can send the survey, how we can send the survey, and the questions that will be on the survey. Now, before I offer it to my other mustached friend in the bottom right corner of my screen, we will be discussing, I would like to talk a little bit about something that Nikhil has been working on. So we have been posting a blog post nearly monthly now. However, we've missed the last 2 months. And so I'd like to give a little bit of an explanation for why. Nikhil is a semi-finalist for the X Prize redesign of a face mask, a prize that is worth $1 million. He is leading up the team that is going underneath this effort. They're looking for votes to ensure that they can become finalists in this prize. And I would just like to congratulate him on his work and support my fellow student regent and all the incredible things that he's doing. It is truly humbling to have such an intelligent and wise counterpart. So Nikhil, best of luck in the X Prize, and I'll pass on the next few updates to you.
Thank you so much, Regent Rusk, and thank you, Chair Penley, for the time today. As far as the next updates go, and we can go to the next slide, please. The first thing that we wanted to provide an update on was the next blog post. As we mentioned, we are a few months late here, but we are looking to have this next blog post out in the next few weeks, highlighting Arizona's contribution specifically, or the university's contribution specifically to Arizona's economy, and particularly placing attainment within the context of our impact on Arizona's economy, as well as the New Economy Initiative. So we look to have that blog post out shortly within the next few weeks, and we're looking forward to that. And then regarding the final update, if we go to the next slide, please. We are also looking to, can we have the next slide, please? Perfect. So the last thing we did, and one thing we mentioned during our previous student regent report in the last board meeting, was our desire to kind of revamp the student regent report, really engage in these direct conversations with campus leaders and try and understand across the three universities what are the most pertinent issues that affect students on all three campuses. And so we are in the midst of these conversations, in part through fireside chats and in part through personal conversations that we've been having together with several student leaders across all three campuses. And so currently we're in the midst of parsing out these issues that are most pertinent. And we look to present those issues in our rearranged kind of revamped student regent report format, hopefully in the next upcoming board meeting. So with that, that kind of concludes our report. Again, I want to say thank you so much to the regents, to the board staff, and to Anthony again as well.
Thanks very much, Regent Dave. Thank you very much, Regent Rusk, for your report today. Any comments or questions from board members? And by the way, Regent Dave, well done.
Thank you so much. I know I can speak for the team here that is working on it here at ASU, is that we would really love to bring this $1 million grand prize home to Arizona State University and home to Arizona. So there's a voting link that's live on xprize.com or xprize.org/mask. And I'd love to encourage everyone to support Arizona, support Arizona State University, and help us bring this grand prize home. So thank you again.
Thank you, Regent Dave. And board members, you have your responsibility now, as outlined by Regent Dave. Next is the presentation from our Faculty Council's representative, Professor Jessica Summers. Professor Summers.
Thank you, Chair Penley, regents, presidents, provosts, and ABOR staff. Representatives from the University Senate leadership from each of the universities met for 2 hours yesterday to discuss several issues of shared concern among our respective faculties at Arizona's public universities. We held our Arizona Faculties Council meeting via Zoom and were joined by Dr. Helen Baxendale and Dr. Mark Denke from the ABOR office. We're grateful for the valuable insights and information that they brought to our conversations yesterday. We're also thankful to University of Arizona Faculty Center staff members, Jane Cherry and Andrew Schroeder, for hosting the Zoom meeting and taking notes. In reference to today's board agenda, Arizona Faculty's committee members are very encouraged by the work of the board and board staff to generate new comparative institutions for all three Arizona public universities. Using a new framework that considers nearest neighbor and best-in-class identification metrics, along with recommended scope conditions to generate separate lists of comparators for educational and research outcomes on a regular basis, is a sound and robust methodology that resonated positively with the AFC. In addition to applying data-driven methodologies, we recommend the board consider a qualitative post hoc process that encourages faculty and leadership to collaboratively narrow the substantive lists generated by quantitative methods alone. For example, the 51 comparators generated for the University of Arizona research outcomes. With a list this long, the U of A will always be better than some and worse than others. But perhaps it's more important to identify a short list of institutions we expect to do as well as, for which the qualitative methodology would be extremely useful. Faculty in particular could effectively weigh in on comparative issues of curriculum, academic programs, and research agendas with those of their colleagues at other institutions. We look forward to having additional conversations with the board and board staff about these particular processes of comparative institution selection. Additionally, considering inputs like state funding and tuition rates may positively affect our ability to perform at the same level as some of our peers. Excuse me. We are also grateful that the board continues to entertain new methods of furthering the financial enterprise of our public universities. AFC members are encouraged by the ongoing discussion of financing through legislative approval for century bonds and other borrowing options, which would allow each university to explore new investment opportunities for strategic initiatives outside of capital projects in order to maintain cutting-edge research, instruction, and service on behalf of our Arizona residents. The board does not need reminding that all three universities have been significantly underfunded by the state of Arizona since the Great Recession. Though each university has found its own way to be efficient and effective institutes of higher education during times of financial exigency, it comes at a high cost to faculty and students. For example, many faculty have been encouraged by their supervisors to incentivize students to return to campus for face-to-face classes in the spring semester because face-to-face courses help to reduce isolation among students, contribute to a more robust campus culture, and generate more tuition revenue. This tactic goes against the current statewide public health data, indicating that Arizona is entering into a second wave of COVID-19 infection, with many residents choosing to travel, see family members, and congregate outside their bubbles for the holidays. This projection does not bode well for student reentry in the spring semester, and faculty do not feel comfortable putting their students or themselves at further risk for infection. We are more than willing to continue offering hybrid or online options for students to maintain a level of safety in our workplaces. And the AFC believes faculty have been very flexible and successful in helping to stem the spread of COVID-19 by providing multiple modalities of excellent undergraduate and graduate instruction. Additionally, the AFC had a lengthy discussion about how the process of increasing the number of online learning courses and programs may unintentionally undercut the faculty's ability to offer high-quality content and curriculum. As you know, the current process required for all new programs is approval via shared governance committees. However, when a program is duplicated for delivery via an online platform, often no approval is needed, which has led to a lack of faculty-driven quality control for the curriculum being taught, as more affiliate faculty are hired to teach courses they did not create. Programs like ED Plus or Ed Plus can support online best practices and a review of written objective, but Ed Plus does not have expertise in the content being presented in courses. If anything, online programs need more resources, faculty, and quality control than their face-to-face counterparts, as evidenced by significantly lower retention rates of students in 100% online programs at all three universities. Online learning can be high-quality learning, but not when the curriculum is simply translated and not transformed. With appropriate support, high standards, quality metrics, transparency of budget, and ensuring the instructor is intellectually invested in the curriculum, online programs can be incredibly successful. We are therefore suggesting that the board considers a similar program approval process for online programs that is expected for face-to-face programs, with appropriate vetting by units, deans, faculty, the provost's office, and ultimately ABOR. Faculty are confident we can provide the kind of support necessary to meet the needs of online students, as long as there is a shared understanding that these students need a different kind of education. It should be appropriately proposed and vetted in a formal manner, separate from face-to-face programs that maintain faculty authority over the curriculum. Additional areas of discussion included a renewed discussion of the refinement of government and civics-related requirements of the ABOR general faculty policy. ABOR staff members Helen Baxendale and Mark Denke reassured the AFC that these required aspects of general education are flexible around course objectives, learning outcomes, and consider faculty expertise in ways that students can glean meaning of civics and government in a variety of contexts. Across our three university campuses, faculty are collaborating on assessment plans, protocols, and instruments for measuring student learning in general education that should align with these courses as they are being created, revised, and provided with the necessary resources to ensure all students obtain a quality education as defined by faculty expertise. The AFC looks forward to continued discussions with the board, provosts, and general education coordinators so that we may support the administration and assessment of high-quality courses in civics and government. This concludes my report from the Arizona Faculty's Council. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Summers. We're going to go into recess right now. We'll return in executive session at 1:30 p.m. and we'll return pursuant to Arizona Revised Statute 38-431.03 and we'll reconvene in executive session to discuss the items that have been posted on our executive session agenda. If there are no comments or questions, I'm going to turn to Executive Director Arnold. We'll take a recess. Executive Director Arnold?
Yeah. I just wanted to ask Jenny, do we need a motion? Do we do the motion now to go into executive session?
Yes, Regent Penley and Executive Director Arnold, you should move to go into executive session.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you, Jenny. Is there, I move that we reconvene in executive session at 1:30 p.m. pursuant to the Arizona Revised Statute that I mentioned before. Is there a second?
Second.
There is a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion does pass. We stand in recess until 1:30 p.m. today.
Thank you, Regents.